All right. I think we're live now. Yeah, surprise. This stream's just going to be a total uh, dog pile on the Godzilla franchise. Overrated. Has anybody actually said that? Looks like people are saying they can't hear anybody else. I don't know if that means me. Chat, tell me who you can hear. But it was working before, right? When we did the test stream. Huh. Stand by, everyone. Yeah, it looks like OBS is not showing the desktop audio coming through for some reason now. Technical difficulties.
How much was that?
You know, it actually wasn't too bad. Like I don't collect anything anymore, but it was around $250 shipped.
Whoa.
Which is, and it's totally worth it, but that's like I don't ever buy anything.
Okay, I think I got it.
And that was like my big purchase.
Looks like everybody can hear you.
We're alive.
Chat, can you hear everyone?
Oh, just seeing one message here.
Chris F says yes.
Why, thank you. Irrelevant 402.
How can we see the chat?
Irrelevant 402 says Blunova, I love your camera and faith video.
I appreciate it.
See, not everybody hates you. You have one fan.
I do, though.
You know what? Well, then it's time to go critical. It's time to bash Godzilla 54.
I can open this in a different browser because.
Listen, guys, I don't actually think Ishiro Honda knows what he's doing. It's a hack fraud.
Ishiro Honda is the worst director I've seen in my life.
Let's see here. There we go. Still Productions TV's in here. Awesome.
Are we still having problems?
I think everything's okay. I'm not seeing any
Pe-
more comments.
People in the chat, can you hear the four of us? Seems like it's a go. Yeah.
Everybody's saying yes.
All right. Thumbs up.
Zilla's here. Yo! People here.
Life goals.
Saying no, don't let Ryan Johnson destroy Godzilla.
Gareth Edwards already beat him to it.
Oh, you know what? That's a good way to get into the discussion. Hot take right away.
Let Ryan Johnson save Godzilla.
He can subvert our expectations.
At this point, how would he even do that? I mean, people were already pretty upset about 2014, and
Godzilla
the
is only
teasing
25 feet tall.
there.
Turns out Godzilla only thought he was big in his mind, and he's actually just...
He was actually just a giant hologram.
Oh, man. He's been female all along.
Oof. I'm not touching that one.
Actually, wouldn't be bad. I mean, considering they called Godzilla it, for what, like the first, in the Showa era, at least?
I think a lot of production material referred to him as a he sometimes.
Gotcha.
I never thought of that. I have to go back and watch the Showa films and see if I can...
Could be the subtitles. I think I'm remembering from like the classic media DVDs, and Lord knows, because there's like always different translations for everything.
Well, there's always a space Godzilla, that unused concept where Godzilla's from space and it's a she, and they put the child in a rocket because she was pregnant to send it back to planet Godzilla.
I want that movie.
That's just Superman with more lizards.
Put in the chat which American director do you think should tackle Godzilla next?
I saw somebody say Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan.
That would be interesting.
What about
In
Quentin
certain
Tarantino?
ways. That would be even more interesting.
You only see Godzilla's feet.
Can you imagine
George
how many
Lucas.
fans would complain about that?
I mean, fans didn't complain about that in Godzilla Meets Bambi.
I had a conversation with my buddies. Like, there was like a 20-minute conversation about Godzilla 2014's feet. I'm just like, what the hell? Like, who cares? Just
Well,
feet.
Elephant feet or something. That whole controversy.
Yeah, the dreaded foot wars of
Controversy.
2013.
Can pachyderm over here,
It seems like Del Toro is the most popular choice right now in the chat.
I mean, he already made a kaiju movie, so kind of a
It's cheating.
obvious choice. Pacific Rim is probably the best kaiju movie that Legendary and Warner Brothers has made, in my opinion.
I, for one, say Tyler Perry should direct the next Godzilla movie.
You guys pick up the Rigo DVD yet?
I have
Yeah,
not.
No.
I want to, though.
Got that the other day, and me and my buddy Max watched it, and interesting. I won't say anything since you guys haven't seen it, but
So do you want to get started talking about our first
do it. Let's get the
movie
show
of
on the road.
decade?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
you guys believe that 2019 is like at an end? Like we're on the verge of a new decade, which is ridiculous. 13 years, fucking King Kong will be 100 years old.
Whoa.
I know, right?
The one that started it all.
So 2014.
Yeah, what's everybody's opinion on it? Let's go down the line. Daikaiju Legends. What do you think of Godzilla 2014, directed by Gareth Edwards?
So I was a victim of the being a freshman in high school at the time, a victim of the overwhelming hype. And I let myself get drawn into it, and I thought it was the most amazing thing for a while. But now it just sits in my memory as kind of lukewarm, I guess. Anytime that I go back and watch that movie, all the standout moments in my head, like the airport confrontation, like the sound design of the Mudos at the bridge, the final battle, like it all sticks with me still, and that might be partly nostalgia. So I enjoy it for that, but I it's definitely a very flawed film in terms of being a Godzilla film, as you know, people like to separate Godzilla films versus actual films for their own specific reasons, and I think it's a decent film on its own, but it definitely is it suffers from maybe not being the most entertaining or memorable because of some of the limitations it gives itself.
I plead the fifth.
Oh no.
Well, if I remember correctly, didn't you review it like one of the people you were with like ripped a poster in half? Or
That was Pacific Rim.
Oh, okay.
That was my brother-in-law who decided to do that. Honestly, it's one of those movies that I've tried to go back and revisit several times, and I still feel the same way about it. The good thing is that I think it finally paid respect to the character that we didn't get in '98, and it was nice to see an American production. No. It gave respect to the character of Godzilla, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it treated him the way he was supposed to be treated. They framed him as he was framed in 84 or 54 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I felt like they respected the character, but that's about as far as I go, man. It's a boring ass movie. I don't like it. I'm not going to knock people who enjoy it. I will knock people who declare it, the best movie ever. And if you don't like it, you're not a true fan. But it was a pretty shoddily made movie, man. And the fact that Gareth Edwards isn't doing anything anymore, I think, is pretty much a testament to his kind of, but it did good stuff in terms of how it handled the character. But it is definitely on my low list.
Like, would you say it's like in your bottom, I don't know, 10 Godzilla movies?
Easily.
Yeah.
I would rather watch Godzilla versus the Smog Monster again than G14.
What? Don't you go disrespecting?
I'd rather we watch King Kong Escapes than G14 again.
I take it you don't like King Kong Escapes?
What was that?
I take it you don't like King Kong Escapes?
Or you keep on like matrixing out there.
Oh, it looks like the stream.
Say that one more time.
I take it you are not a fan of King Kong Escapes?
No, but I'm a fan of all the older movies. But I mean, some are more cheesy than others, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you ask me if I'd rather take G14 or Godzilla Raids again, then I am gonna have a really hard time. But like, it's the thing about that movie that I think is most important too, and I've seen this time and time again, is it got a lot of young kids, and I'm talking like 8 years old, 9 years old, into these movies. There was this Godzilla Fest down here in Arizona, in Tucson, which is about an hour and a half away from Phoenix. Godzilla Fan Freaks, another YouTube channel, was hosting it. And he was going around asking people like how they got into Godzilla. And there was like a 9-year-old little girl saying that like G14 got her into the franchise. And, and like, I'm never going to sit there and be like, oh, it's a shitty movie, you shouldn't like it, blah, blah, blah. But, it did have an effect on people. And it's, it is an important film for a number of reasons. I personally just don't like it.
Fair enough.
Yep.
I definitely agree there. I think it's, I mean, obviously it kind of kickstarted the whole, I don't know if I would call it a renaissance, but new wave of
Yeah.
Godzilla that we're seeing today now. So I think it's at least deserving of respect for that, for what it's, brought about, in the same way that 98 kind of brought about the Millennium Era. Yeah, it's very mixed for me overall, but
Do you guys? I don't know if this is true or not, but was Shin Godzilla made because G14 was successful, or were they planning on making that like before?
My understanding about that is because 2014 was supposed to come out in 2012, but it got pushed back. So I think Toho was gearing up to have their own film for the 60th anniversary, just in case Godzilla 2014 didn't get made in time. Toho approached Anno in January 2013.
Okay.
I remember at Higuchi's panel at G-Fest a couple years ago, he was saying that, when they approached him about it, it was just a very limited time window between, G14 and then King of the Monsters. It was like a year and a half. And at that point, they didn't even have a script. So, I mean, it was a pretty rushed job, in the vein of the Heisei era and all that stuff. But I mean,
I think Anno finished his strip in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. Not unless he just wasn't done with it. But I think he had already submitted to Toho for a review. But
completely possible. I'm just remembering that, like, back when at Higuchi's panel, it might have been 2 years. I don't know. But apparently, according to Higuchi, at least from what I recall, he was approached first, and then he's the one who got Anno in there.
Yes.
When
Toho first approached Anno, he said no. And then Higuchi came later and asked Anno to join him, and and the rest is history.
well, because I remember, at least as far as I recall, in one of, if not the original, like, press release regarding Shin Godzilla and like being officially announced, they had mentioned something about, kind of in a like a slight sarcastic tone, with like, oh, we won't bow down to the
I totally remember that too. Right.
Yeah,
right.
they say the Godzilla was going to be bigger than the legendary Godzilla. It started becoming like
so
a dick measuring
the
contest, essentially.
the famous stick
Toho.
measuring. Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely think if it wasn't created in reaction to 2014, like, even before it was released, if they were like, oh, we got to do our own now that Hollywood's doing again. But I think at least part of, their treatment of the, what you say, I wouldn't call it marketing, but the way that they sort of presented the film seemed to definitely be like, oh, we're going to show up the American version and, make something for the true Godzilla fans.
It was
Japanese, of course, but
it was probably friendly competition, is how I saw it, but could be wrong.
Oh yeah, I mean they've got a
Yeah, I don't
contract,
think-
of course, so
yeah.
it's like we're not gonna be like, yeah, to hell with them,
Americans suck. They bombed us twice. Oh, I guess it's my turn to talk about 2014. Well, I love the first half of the movie, actually. I'm a big fan of that, as long as Bryan Cranston is alive, so about 30 to 40 minutes of the film. I believe Bryan Cranston said something to the effect in an interview that he disagreed with the decision to kill him off.
Yeah, that was
because
recent.
his character was the emotional core, and there was nothing really to replace that once he died. And I think he's 100% right. The last half of the movie is pretty iffy. I feel like the reasons to keep Aaron Taylor Johnson's character involved gets pretty contrived. How he just happens to be at almost every monster appearance and the only guy who survives each time. And Yeah, it was really missing that human element that Bryan Cranston brought to the first half. But I don't blame Gareth Edwards for that. I blame the script for that. I think Gareth Edwards does great work. I love monsters, and visually, he brought something special to Rogue One. Godzilla as well. I like how he framed Godzilla. The movie has some pretty great cinematography when you can see it. The home media release kind of botched that, but would I be opposed to him trying again? No, but just needs a better script this time.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry to interrupt. Wasn't there like 7 writers or something like that in that ballpark?
Yeah,
Because
there
it
was
got pitched
quite a
around a
few.
lot.
Yeah, I think 2014 went through a few hands, and it shows.
Yeah,
I
the last
definitely
hand was
like
Frank
agree.
Darabont. He went in there and did, like, I think he just contributed to that one scene where Bryan Cranston says goodbye to
Oh right.
his wife dying. Like, I think that's literally it. He just added
And
a
that's the
little bit.
best part of the movie.
I definitely agree though that I think like a lot of the technical aspects of the movie itself are pretty underrated,
Yeah.
and they kind of get overshadowed by the fact that everyone, right, kind of rightfully so, bashes on the dark home release, because I think there's a lot of really like cool looking cinematography in there. The sound design, especially on the Mudos, is like, I don't know, at least for me, that sticks out as one of the more memorable monster roars in recent memory. The
2014 does have great moments. It has, of course, the Halo jump, the kiss of death, the power plant destruction at the beginning of the movie.
Airport scene, the whole Hawaii sequence,
Yeah,
I think
the
is
airport
great.
scene. Yeah, it has great moments, but I don't think it holds together completely as a film.
The airport scene, man. God. The build up, the build up, the build up. He's there. Cut away. Show what happened on CNN, and then do the same trick another 2 times.
Yeah.
Like,
I've always said that the
oy.
movie would improve substantially if they just held on that fight for at least maybe a couple minutes. Instantly, I think people would complain a lot less about there being not enough monster just by tweaking that a little bit.
My problem was never the monster action. I knew going in that it wasn't going to have a lot. I watched the Jeremy Johns review where he was pretty excited about it and said he would buy it on Blu-ray, and he said there wasn't very many monster scenes, if I remember correctly. So I knew going in, I was like, okay, if you have a compelling story, I will be a-okay. If it's as great as he's making it sound like it is, then all right, sign me up.
What's your guys' thoughts on the score after all this time?
The Batman Forever villain theme. Like, sorry.
I
like,
never made that connection
Yeah, I was
until you
literally
just
about to say that. I was
like, can't you imagine, like, Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face just like going around with that music in the background or something?
Are you
Or
talking
even
about like
Danny
the?
DeVito as the
Are you
Penguin.
talking about like the main theme with like the drums when like Godzilla's like kind of swimming towards Ken Watanabe and he's looking through the binoculars and it's kind of building up?
Yeah,
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of that same motif throughout like a good majority of the movie, which I think I really love because I'm a huge like, I'll whore myself out for any sort of like big leitmotif throughout a movie like that. And I think
sorry.
maybe
Go
it's
ahead.
the fact that it's utilized so much that it's stuck in my head. But I think it's, obviously it's not Ifukube or Segisu we'll get into, or anything like that, but I think it's definitely a pretty cool and memorable score in its own right.
I don't think we can be friends anymore.
Oh man.
I hate that 2014 wastes Ken Watanabe. He really doesn't do much the entire movie, and
Yeah, he kind
it
of just stands
wastes
around.
Elizabeth Olsen, who I enjoy her as an actress, and she didn't really get to do much either.
They had a great cast. They had a
Yeah.
great cast. And that was one of the things going in with there. We're like, yeah, we have like an Oscar, caliber cast here, and everybody kind of just probably, acted like they were just stuck with the doldrums basically.
They didn't have any time to do anything really. It was so focused on Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, Ford Brody.
Yeah, I think the reason why they did that, it was he's basically a functional character. They wanted him to be there as a human perspective for the action, and as a result, all the other characters kind of get pushed aside, including the more interesting Dr. Serizawa.
Yeah, we totally should have explored him more than we ended up doing. But
the movie should have been like Dr. Serizawa and Bryan Cranston's character kind of like coming together
yes,
with theories and everything.
That would have been pretty interesting to watch.
See, I think the like severe lack of, action, even though it's, by far it's not the least amount of screen time Godzilla's ever had, like people make it out to be. I think if it, had a lot more, intriguing and investing human drama, it could have been so much better. There's something to keep you invested in between the monster action scenes, but it's just not enough to really hold any water, is the unfortunate thing.
To completely go off topic, but I want to give a shout out to Asusa Productions, and the Omni viewer has made an appearance in the chat.
Oh, they're both here. Oh, sick.
Thanks. Hello.
For a big complaint, I didn't like how the bomb at the end was completely kind of ignored.
Yeah, that was really unrealistic. Like
realistically, that would have done a lot more damage, and it's kind of jarring to see that in a Godzilla movie, to see a nuke mishandled that severely.
Yeah.
The best thing about that movie was just what it did. It got Godzilla back into the public consciousness, and it really did kickstart everything. Without that movie, we would not. I mean, obviously, we wouldn't have Shin and stuff. But I mean, that thing seriously just kickstarted a ton of stuff. There was a ton of new fans that came in because of it. You can sit here and be like, this sucks, that sucks, and trust me, I could do that all day. But like, it seriously was it was the jolt in the arm that the franchise needed. It and a Japanese movie wouldn't have done that. It needed that big American movie with that big American money to just be put it out there in the world and be like, hey kids, Godzilla's cool. Don't you want to see the cool movie? And it did that, I think, to an extent.
I don't know. On a serious note, 2014 shouldn't have been made, because Godzilla Final Wars is the best thing that happened to Godzilla in its 65-year history. That was the peak. That is peak performance Godzilla. And we can never hope to achieve anything better.
Godzilla is very efficient in that movie. I mean,
after 50 years, he's developed some leaner muscles. He can take care of it all quicker.
Yeah. Move on to Shin.
Yeah.
So are we all in agreement here that it's probably the best film that came out in the decade?
No question about it.
100%.
Yeah.
It's just funny because like all these people praising G14 and then they hated Shin, and then all the people that love Shin hated G14. Like it was it's just nice to see the Japanese finally start taking a little bit of risk with their stuff, not having to go through another series of Millennium movies where it was just the same old, day in, day out,
Yeah, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla. Mothra, King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla.
But this time, King Ghidorah is a good guy.
And he's smaller, and he looks pathetic.
I mean, G14 might have I think jump-started kind of the interest again, but dude, Shin cemented it. And Jake can freaking attest to this, man. They are riding that wave to this day over in Japan.
Of course.
Godzilla's store is all about Shin. They put up the new statue. I mean, that thing is in the public consciousness, and the pop culture public consciousness over there, for better or for worse.
Shin got back on the map in Japan. Completely, yes.
Totally. Significance is huge, just because of the fact that obviously the anime didn't do nearly as well, and Final Wars didn't do nearly as well. but that thing was extraordinarily significant on a whole bunch of levels. And I like it as a movie. I really do. It's one of my favorites. People can disagree with that, but yeah, just a damn well made movie in my opinion.
I think saying that Final Wars didn't do very well or didn't do as well is the understatement of the century. Final Wars is, of the general release movies, the third lowest grossing Godzilla movie, Japanese Godzilla movie in the entire franchise.
Wasn't there? I remember a whole bunch of stuff at the time. Like there was something about they weren't allowed to use like actors in previews or something because of the fact that like different agencies wouldn't allow that to happen or something, like agencies that represented the actors. Like the movie had a whole bunch of stuff going for it, or going against it rather.
For one, I think it came out at the wrong time. It released the same weekend as The Incredibles and Howl's Moving Castle, if I'm not mistaken. And that was a weird release date, especially since Toho released both Howl and Final Wars. I think they should have pushed one back or one up to give Godzilla some room to breathe.
Because I will say this much about Final Wars, not to interrupt you, but I'd rather take that than just another freaking Tezuka outing where it's just like the same old, same boring story, same whatever. Like I'd rather be entertained with a bad movie than be bored by a quote unquote good movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think Tezuka took a lot of the tropes from the 90s films and improved upon them, but by that point it was kind of
too little too late.
Yeah.
The stuff that he was doing with Mechagodzilla was like awesome conceptually, but it just like with the anime movies, it didn't go far enough. Presented some really cool ideas and then that's it. We got nothing else to show here.
All right, Shin. So Shin is ticket-wise the fourth or fifth most successful Japanese Godzilla movie of all time. It sold 5.69 million tickets. It overperformed. It was only supposed to sell like 3 million, I believe, which is a huge jump from 3 to 5.69 million. Yeah, it really touched Japanese audiences. It will continue to define the franchise for a while. I like the movie. I love it. It's my favorite Godzilla movie this decade and probably my second favorite Godzilla movie. It is not your traditional Godzilla movie for sure. It's more political than what you would expect out of a Godzilla movie. But I love the characters. I love the pacing. I love the amount of thought that went into it. Like how the military targets Godzilla's eyes and his legs instead of firing at random, or the translation joke about Godzilla's name, it coming from America as Godzilla and being translated to his Japanese name. There's a lot of attention to detail that you don't get out of a lot of Godzilla movies that I appreciate. They make Godzilla a believable threat, a creature that can evolve endlessly is a much bigger deal than what most Godzillas have been to date. So it made him more of an international crisis than just centered in Japan and destroying one city by day. I love Kamata-kun, Godzilla's second form or third form. I find it adorable.
Adorable and horrifying at the same time.
I love Higuchi. I love Patterson. Her English isn't always the best, but it's not too bad. And there's not too much of it. So I can forgive that.
It's definitely like I'm right there with you. The more times that I watch it, the more it kind of rises up to being like right now it just kind of sits in my top 3 favorite Godzilla films.
Mm-hmm.
I really love, and not to like throw any shade or disrespect to 90% of other Godzilla movies, but this in its own way kind of just feels like a genuine not art house film, but it's just like something dignified in a
Yeah, I
way
totally
that
get what you're
most
saying.
other
Man,
Yeah.
like most other Godzilla movies feel. Like as much as I love, like all the Showa movies and stuff, it's definitely just we're gonna point a camera at some guys in rubber suits fighting with some cool pyrotechnics and effects. Whereas this just feels so genuine in what it's trying to present. And it obviously, I think American views are kind of skewed because it's definitely not a movie that's made for Western audiences, because a lot of the issues and characters that are portrayed in the movie aren't something that Americans can relate to very easily, if at all. But I think it comes from such a pure like cultural kind of foundation that it really stands out overall. And it's people will complain about, oh, the characters are boring or there's too many meetings or whatever. But I think that this movie works those kinds of things into the story so much more than other Godzilla movies would, where it doesn't feel like human padding to fill out the space in between the monster action. It feels like genuine sort of interactions between governments and all these different bureaucracies and stuff that are trying to figure out how to stop the monster, and we're just sort of like left to sit and watch the sort of, you know not idiocy, but for lack of a better term, just sort of inability to act at a reasonable pace unfold, and just the complete sort of turmoil that induces. It really just stands out overall as just being such an interesting story to me that I can't help but love it every time I watch it.
Yeah, I think the film was very level about how it dealt out its criticism. The politicians who mess up aren't cartoonishly evil. They mean
Exactly.
well,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the
but
prime
for
minister is a great character because he's kind of shown to be like in over his head, but he's genuinely trying to do the right thing. He just is kind of has all these options in front of him, and he kind of going with the flow depending on what people are telling him.
hmm
how do you guys feel
yep.
about that whole stance of? I know there's a few fans out there that think this, but they're like, Godzilla fans don't understand this movie because they're not Japanese. I.e., kind of like the what Jake was kind of touching on, the political implications. Very conservative kind of stance. Like, does that enter? Like, do you guys even focus on that at all? Like, what are
Um,
your views of that?
quick comment. Someone in the comment section in the chat mentioned that Shin reminded them of the host, and I will second that opinion. There's a lot of similarities between those two movies.
Oh yeah.
Shin was a better movie.
I completely agree, but yeah, I definitely see the connection that people can make there.
both films are Asian countries that with close ties to the U.S., where their films criticize both their own government and the U.S. and the relation to the U.S. And they both use giant monsters in order to get the ball rolling, and both are kind of quirky in characters and mood throughout. But they both handle serious moments and the more lighthearted moments well.
Yeah, there's so many great quirky little moments of humor in Shin Godzilla. And so when people say that the characters there's not like good characters, it's like they're not deep, but they all have personality to them to make them feel like real characters, even if you only see them for like, I don't know, a minute in the film.
The characters serve their purpose. They
Yeah.
are engaged throughout, and they say interesting things. Like when people say the characters in Shin are boring, compared to who? Compared to what?
See, I can understand the argument that the characters are boring because we don't get to spend much time with them, but like for some reason, they all really stick with me. Like even the ones that have single lines or something. Like I just remember all their different quirks and little um little things they input into the big conversations and meetings and stuff. Like, the guy that like shrieks in the middle of the meeting room when he figures out
Yeah.
like the whole fission thing and stuff. The one like quirky scientist girl, um, the guy with like the towel wrapped around his shoulders in the meeting room. Like, they all stick in my mind for some reason. I guess it might just be because they feel really naturally integrated into the whole world that the film sets up, that I just don't mind that we don't get to spend much time with them, because they, yeah, like you said, they serve their purpose. And that's kind of it's a bit of a Japanese cultural thing. They're very utilitarian, where it's about everyone being sort of cogs in the entire machine of the country, and everyone just has their little purpose that they serve.
Yeah, more to that point, the Japanese tagline of the film is Japan reality versus Godzilla fiction. Japan itself is the character.
Hmm.
We see all the moving parts, which are the characters or tropes, as some people would like to call them. I like the characters in the movie. I like Higuchi. He's one of my favorite Godzilla protagonists. And I think him and Patterson have great chemistry.
Yeah, they are like human representations of the relationship between America and the United States. Except Keiko's kind of like an intermediary between the two, because she's half Japanese, half American.
So let's talk about that Attack on Tokyo scene, the night scene. Probably one of the most iconic moments in the Godzilla franchise, when Godzilla unleashes his atomic breath on Tokyo.
Oh yeah, like I mean, yeah, it's become just an absolute icon of the whole franchise. Like the amount of people online that you know make their own like recreations of that moment, or make art, or little montage compilations of it, or they'll reference it in fan films or what have you. But it's a key turning point in the film too, which is very nice. Like, it doesn't just feel like the obligatory, oh, we gotta show off Godzilla's atomic breath. It feels like a genuine sort of reaction, and then all the characters around Godzilla like actually react to it, and it feels like there's actual consequence when you see that overhead shot of the kind of the radiation fallout of
Oh
Tokyo.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that like almost looks like it could have just come from a newsreel of the Fukushima disaster, which is really just insane.
I love the moment after just as much, when Gucci is walking down the street at night, and then you hear all the voices talking about all the damage Godzilla caused, about the radiation levels, about how the prime minister and the rest of the government officials have disappeared, and it's just him getting angrier and angrier. And that music from Ava is playing. That is one of my favorite moments in the film.
Yeah, the whole sequence is just like perfection. I come back to it and watch it sometimes just as like a piece by itself, over and over again. So sometimes I just get a hankering and I'm just like, let me watch that scene again.
Heck, all the Godzilla moments are great. I love Kamata-kun going through the city with Persecution of the Masses playing. I love the military's attack on Godzilla.
That's one of the greatest military like battle sequences ever. Like, it's just so well done.
Hmm. And I even love the climax. They drop towers on Godzilla, and he
Yeah,
just like slowly falls down.
it's
Like,
definitely one of the
no.
weirdest solutions to defeating Godzilla.
It kind of works with the theme though, because like you're saying, it's literally Japan, in the form of Tokyo skyscrapers taking on Godzilla, which is so, and that's just a odd flip on the usual Godzilla formula that it's comical in a way, but it's so memorable.
And it's important to note that is an international effort. That the U.S., Germany, and France play very important roles in Japan even having a chance against Godzilla during that scene.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this like the first Godzilla movie to have like a true international cooperation? Because usually Godzilla movies are very insular with where they take place.
Monster Zero, the U.S. and Japan seem to be pretty tight.
So
And
that scene in Godzilla versus the Thing too, with the Frontier missiles.
Oh yeah.
I think
Common,
G-Force.
not unheard of.
I think the G-Force is supposed to be an international organization in the Heisei films.
Yeah, they are. I don't think they ever really they don't get too deep into it though.
No.
It's still
Oh,
pretty
G-Force.
much Japanese people. With the occasional poorly acted American actor.
So, did you guys love the music for Shin Godzilla, or did you hate it, or were you just neutral on it? What?
I love it.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna. I probably consider it to be. Maybe it might be my favorite score, even though it's not Ifukube. I say that tepidly. It might be number 2, but yeah, Persecution of the Masses in and of itself is one of my favorites. Like I listen to it sometimes when I'm like driving in the car or something.
Yeah, it's even though a good, I don't know, what do I say, like 6 to 7 tracks are from either Evangelion or Showa Godzilla movies. Like the new stuff that Sugisu brings to the table works so well, and I think the inclusion of the pre-existing themes, it works because they don't feel forced in there necessarily. They don't stick out. Even when during Shin's first attack and it's the King Kong and Mechagodzilla themes or whatever. Like it fits oddly, despite like this big chorus that was playing when dopey looking Kamada-kun was attacking Tokyo earlier.
How do you feel
So,
about the music being like not remastered, but being like just taking the old tracks? Because I know that's one of the criticisms is that it doesn't mesh well with the modern footage.
I think that was Ano's idea. I think his intention, if I remember correctly, was that he wanted Shin to feel like a documentary film.
I feel like a documentary film.
So there was an interview where the sound designer of the film talked about that a bit. I'll go look for it, and you guys can keep talking.
As far as the music goes, honestly, it's really good. It's no Batman Forever villain theme, I'll tell you that much. But it's it's really good. The Atomic Breath scene with the music behind it is just one of those things where we had never gotten anything up to that point like that, and it just sets a completely different precedent. And I think it's how it's kind of in some ways kind of similar to G14 in terms of just the build up. Not saying it's exactly like it, but they try to build it up a little bit. But this one is like built up and then expanded upon by tenfold, just with all the craziness that follows with the breath turning into the fire breath, and then it turns into the beam, and then you get the back beams, and it goes back to the beam again. It's just really beautiful stuff, and crafted very well.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about the fact that they were using the pre-existing recordings. I mean, and, obviously you can kind of tell. And I think that's only with the Ifukube themes, all the Evangelion ones um reorchestrated, which is interesting. Um yeah, I just never had thought about it, I guess. I saw someone, I think it was OmniViewer in the chat, was like, Yeah, he said using the older tracks makes Shin Godzilla feel like a fan film to me, and it detracts from the professionalism, which I can
Isn't that
understand.
kind of like the big hot thing? Is just the nostalgia porn? Right?
Well,
Star Wars can do it. Why can't Godzilla do it?
I was gonna say, literally, Star Wars, specifically like Attack of the Clones, they reused their own score to pad out, some of the random scenes that they made in there. Granted, that's within its own movie, but Showa Godzilla films weren't exempt from that either. They reused a lot of the same old Ifukube recordings, if not just the straight up same melodies. Which obviously there's a difference between performing it new again and just using the same recording, but I don't think it detracts from the professionalism, especially if there is some intent behind it from a story or artistic perspective. But
Any
I don't know,
validity to
I
the
never found it
story that
distracting.
is there any validity to the story that they kind of painted themselves in a corner that like it was done because they were kind of rushed for time? I thought I heard something along those lines.
I
That
think
like,
I've heard that before too. I don't know if it's true though.
but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's true either.
I wouldn't be shocked if it was true, but
I think Higuchi mentioned that if they knew that King of the Monsters was going to come later, they would have spent more time on it.
I don't think it detracts. I mean, I think it adds to it, but again, it's just opinion.
Do you think it would have been improved if they did remaster the tracks and get a whole orchestra in there and redo them?
I mean, it'd be cool. You know what I mean? But I mean, at the same time, when's the last time we heard those vintage recordings? You know, we've heard kind of remastered stuff for the past 20, 30 years with the Heisei and Millennium movies and
That's true.
everything. I just don't think it. I just don't think it would add like a night and day difference. I mean, sound design is extraordinarily important for a movie, but I think that the usage of vintage recordings is actually, giving it a feeling that Ono and Higuchi probably wanted. It wasn't whether it was because they were painted in a corner or not. It does give a different feel than if a Hollywood sound studio, took a pass at it and made some big booming freaking mix for it. I like it the way it is, honestly. I don't really know how much it would improve if it had like G14 sound design, which Jake also mentioned is very good, and I would agree with that. But I just don't think that it would make that much of a difference in the long run.
I agree. I think if it was reperformed, the impact that it has on the movie would have changed very little, if at all. And I mean, if you want to hear what those songs sound like reperformed, I think they in the Godzilla.
I took a recent recording of one of Ifukube's tracks and put it to a 30-second clip of the. Everyone's curious what that might sound like and look like with a more recent recording attached to the film.
Yes.
I was just curious myself.
So do you guys have any like criticisms of Shin Godzilla that you can think of?
That last act, man. That last act.
Drags?
It's all like the editing. Like you're not going to find a better edited Godzilla movie, in my opinion. Like especially in the beginning, like with his introduction and stuff, it's so staccato. It's cutting here, cutting there, tons of visual information just coming in, coming in, coming in. And as soon as that atomic breath scene happens, like I get that they have to thematically slow down a little bit, but I think it slows down a little bit too much. I think you could have like taken some stuff out of there and make it a little leaner, a little quicker. But
what do you think they could have cut?
Need some work. Well, like for instance, the whole German scene. The scene where it cuts to those scientists and I forget what they're asking for, but just little things like that. That it's like, do we really need to see that? Was that really all that necessary? Because by the time the finale picks up again, it's back to the quickness. Yeah, we're on our final mission kind of thing. But it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's I think that for me personally, I think that's what kind of stands out as being kind of like a more major issue.
I think some of the Obviously, you know, Japanese visual effects is nowhere up to the, you know, level of
To your standard, Jake, just say it.
No.
I'm kidding. This kid should be working for Subaraya. If you guys haven't seen Daikaiju stuff, I'm sorry, I'm going to go on a detour for a second. He did a panel at G-Fest where he was showing off stuff, and he did a side-by-side recreation of some of the more modern Subaraya effects, and his effects look better than the Subaraya versions. So continue, Jake. I just had to pimp you out for a minute.
Well, I gotta say that I watched your Godzilla's Revenge video, and the editing and the presentation in that video is excellent.
Thank you, man. That means a lot. Where was I before my head was inflated to twice its max?
You're saying the visual effects aren't up to snuff.
Yeah, so they're not up to the standard that people would expect from Hollywood, obviously, because their industry is just, it's a different ballpark. But there's definitely a lot of moments, because Godzilla, I'd say a majority of the time, is animated really well because they show so much restraint in how he moves. But there's a good couple of shots in there where it's just, oh, what were they doing? The key ones, like there's one during the atomic breath scene where his tail is kind of just like stuck in a frozen pose as he's like turning around and throwing the beam everywhere. And then of course the one that everyone talks about where he just kind of like waddles for a little bit
Yeah.
as the scene ends and then goes to sleep.
It's a very quick shot, but yeah, it's kind of odd.
Yeah, it's stuff that you notice on repeat viewings for sure, but I definitely
There's
think
a ton of VFX houses that worked on that, right? Like
yeah,
if you look at the credits, it's just like,
yeah, like it looks really, really good in my opinion.
Yeah, for a
time, but a little more polish would not have hurt.
For a Japanese film that costs $15 million, as opposed to the $160 or $200 million Hollywood spends on their effects films, I think the effects are pretty solid. All Godzilla films have their wonky shots or three.
Yeah.
So I think Shin can afford to have its wonky shots or three.
Yeah, I don't think it's a detriment to the film at all, but it's, you know, because I'm a VFX editor guy, so I'm like, that could use some polish. That's my little brain trying to be like, no.
I couldn't find the exact quote I was looking for about the music, but Ano does mention that he wanted the film to be documentary-like, and that's what Honda wanted for the original film. And Ano was very insistent that Shin seemed like the original film. He wanted to be very respectful towards Godzilla 54. So
I don't want to be a blasphemer or anything, but I do appreciate it being a nice modern update, you know, as 84 was for its time and as 54 was for its time, you know. I do think that as a single creature outing, it did its job. I mean, obviously that can be up for debate, but it definitely did something that a lot of the more recent films have not, including G14, you know. Whereas, and this is something else I wanted to make mention, is that I think Shin was actually trying to say something, and G14 didn't know what it was saying. You know, oh, atomic bombs. It's like, yeah, what about it? And it doesn't really know what it's trying to do. You know, a thematic perspective, at least in my opinion.
Okay, here's a quote from Ano. He says, "I refused the offer since I didn't have confidence that I could exceed the first film or come close to equaling it. But I thought that if I were to come close, if I were to come even a little close, I would have to do the same thing as the first film."
Fair enough.
Just don't fix it if it's not broken, I guess.
So how much do you like? Are you guys a fan of the design? Like, what do you think about it?
It's one of my favorites. I love the grotesque appearance. I mean, radiation mutates things, and I think that Shin is a perfect example of that. He's an abomination. He should not exist. He's probably in pain. He borrowed They borrowed a lot of points from the concept art of the original Godzilla, which again goes back to Anno's desire for it to be like Godzilla 54. So they recontextualized a lot of that stuff, and I think they did a great job at it, including Kamata-kun, who I find adorable.
Yeah, that's what I love about the Shin design is it looks very reminiscent of the original 54 design, but just twisted and malformed and grotesque.
It's very, very like unusual, and just, I mean, it takes some risks with, kind of reimagining the Godzilla design, and I can totally understand why people don't like it, but I think it's a design that is made to serve the movie that it's in, which I think is very, very commendable, and I think it's really memorable because of that.
I think there's a interview floating on YouTube around somewhere with Anno where he talked about when he first proposed Godzilla having multiple forms to Toho, that they were like, "That's not happening."
Oh no, that's totally
And-
true. In fact, Higuchi was like, they had to work backwards because they wanted like Godzilla to evolve like from where he was at into something else.
Yeah,
And they were like, no. But then the idea of Godzilla evolving into Godzilla was apparently fine.
I think Anno mentioned that a big point which convinced Toho to let him do what he wanted was that Bandai got involved and convinced Toho that it would be a
No
wonderful merchandising opportunity for Godzilla to have multiple forms. And then Toho was like, "All right, Anno, you can do what you want."
I doubt it.
Well, I think
But,
some of
the thing I don't appreciate the most about it is the fact that, they try to go too radical with it. If you look at some of those designs in the Art of Shin Godzilla book, do you guys have that book, by the way?
I
do.
was going to bring that up. A
Such a
lot of
good
the
book.
concept designs.
But it was really nice to see them actually try to do something at least a little bit different. Even if it didn't go completely balls to the wall, even though some people would probably argue that it did. That design for me, when I first saw it, I remember just being like, "Oh man, this thing looks just so derpy." And then finally, when you see it and you see it in the context of the film, I think it's one of the few times where I had formed an opinion beforehand, but definitely changed my opinion after. One of my favorites, for sure. It's a nice modern design, and I think it's definitely one of the more horrific looking Godzillas out there. Sure. So yeah, really good stuff. Really fucking good stuff.
So is that it for Shin?
Yeah, I think we should move on
Oh,
to
yeah.
the best.
Oh boy.
These guys.
Yikes.
The anime.
I can't
trilogy.
comment. I got to zip my mouth on all of this.
I was going to say Matt's not going to like what people are going to say.
The chat is about to get fiery.
Who's jumping in first?
Do we want to tackle them one by one, or like kind of as a whole?
Let's tackle them one by one.
All right.
All right, Planet of the Monsters.
I will jump in here first. I will be the sacrifice. Planet of the Monsters. Well, when I first watched it, I think I had the same opinion that most Godzilla fans still continue to have, that it was a boring waste of potential. And I was excited about the anime Godzilla would hold, and what I got was not what I was expecting or what I was hoping. They teased quite a few monsters that really didn't get any attention besides a quick mention and a quick shot. So going into it with the head, I kind of hated it. But I rewatched it a few weeks ago with a non-Godzilla fan, someone who doesn't care about kaiju films, and I have to say that I've come around to it. It does some interesting things with Godzilla. It's not perfect. There are some things with the medium it was working with that could have made it a better film, but the pacing doesn't bother me for one. I do like the characters. I like the setting. I like how different concepts and tropes we've seen a million times in Godzilla were reinvented in interesting ways. And some of those have become my favorite versions of those ideas. I like it. It's my least favorite of the three, but it isn't nearly as bad as some people try to make it out to be. And that's what I'll say for now.
I think it's my first viewing was definitely, you know, kind of more aligned with your viewpoint, where it's like, oh, this is not what I was expecting or whatever. I mean, because I didn't follow any of this. Like I didn't watch the trailers because I'm just like, I just want to go in blind. And I think the disappointment for me lies in the fact that with the medium of animation, you know, anime in particular, that's like the ultimate sort of playground to just take Godzilla to his absolute limit. Not in terms of size, even though they do that. um, but you know, in terms of aesthetic and overall scope and scale, it feels like it could have been far more interesting visually, at the very least, above all else. Because I look at these movies and I kind of just have to like ask, like, what warrants them being animated, if that makes sense. Like they kind of feel like movies that could have been live action in some way, and they would have had, you know, the same kind of impact. The art style for me didn't really win me over, I guess. And overall, it felt like a bit of wasted potential. But the more that I look back on it, the more I'm just kind of like, it exists.
High praise. It exists.
Should we get some positive comments from
Well,
Monstrosities?
I'm holding back until we all go through it.
I think with Planet of the Monsters, I was disappointed.
I'm going to put this out there now.
Yeah.
Well, I will go if no one else wants to go.
First, hang on. I'll say something. I'm going to make the most controversial comment of the chat yet. I like Haruo as a character. Now you can go.
I don't know what else I can add.
Was I just kicked?
Kicked?
Out of the stream?
I just got. I apparently the call just booted me out.
Huh.
It's because I like the anime movies.
I was gonna say because you like the
bastards. I got bad taste.
It's the hatred from Godzilla fans coming in to disrupt the chat.
I'm sorry. What was it that you were posting before? You said you were going to post something.
Oh no! So I was going to make the most controversial statement of this chat yet, which I like Haruo as a character.
Oh,
I think I enjoy what his character is. I think some of it is lost in the performance, for me at least, where he's just kind of constantly yelling. So the moments that he kind of like lets his rage lose some of their impact for me.
I think he's the least interesting in the first film. I think he gets more interesting as it goes along, but in Planet of the Monsters, he kind of grates on my nerves with how angry he is all the time. He's very one note.
Having gone back to it like last week, like I thought too he was angry the whole time, but he's angry a lot, but he was not as angry in the first movie as I remember him being. But yeah, he does have a lot of
that
moments
be my
where
memory. Then it's been, I think it's pretty much been since these movies were coming out that I last viewed them.
Do you mind if I rant?
Sure.
And rave?
Go right ahead.
Feel free.
Full disclosure, I am stupidly biased towards these movies just because of the fact I did see them, all three of them, opening day in Japan. I don't say that to brag. I just say that There's a lot of memories attached to them. So it's definitely a biased opinion. But everything that's been said about the disappointment and stuff, first time I saw it, completely agreed. Because, you're coming off of Shin Godzilla, and here's a movie that took risks and was doing different things. And then Planet of the Monsters comes around, and it's just like, yeah, cool. And it was just like, it was just an operation to blow up Godzilla, which we've seen 1,000 times before. Second viewing, liked it more, but any criticism lobbed against this movie, I think, sticks. I will never sit here and justify that it's like a great movie. I do like a lot of the things they do with it. I love the art design. I love the world that it creates. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, and there are things in that movie where I'm like, they've got to have had inspiration from that. The music I thought was great, and I was expecting complete garbage since it was coming from the guy who did Space Godzilla in 2000, and what we got was actually a pretty multi-layered score, which it's not Shin is kind of like this classical kind of like just epic kind of thing, but there was so many different musical cues, even just in Planet of the Monsters in general, at least in my opinion, that really diversified it and made me go, wow, this guy really upped his game. But yeah, it's not a great movie. I like it for my own personal reasons. But the idea that it was a disappointment because it didn't do enough with its medium, I think, is a completely and totally valid point. Because I really think that these movies just ended up being the way they were because it just was like time and money, like all these movies are. It's always about time and money, 3 movies within a year. And they're essentially almost all the same film, almost. But yeah, upon repeated viewings, I've definitely, warmed up to it for sure. Yeah, there's my rant. I'll shut up now.
I too thought that the first and second movies were too much alike until again I went back and watched all 3 of them again, and they're pretty different. The first movie moves a bit quicker than the second one, but I liked Haruo's reflective nature in the second movie. The characters are more developed in the second movie as well. We see more of where the trilogy is going.
For sure.
Although in the first movie, going back to watch it after seeing 2 and 3, a lot of where the films are going is actually talked about quite a bit, especially by Metaphys. So that's something to give it a little rewatch value.
Not to interrupt us, but I want to point out Inshoma is in the house here, who is the title card artist for Brendan Tenold's Godzilla reviews, and also an amazing son of a bitch. So, and Titan of Water too. Both of those dudes are extremely awesome.
Welcome.
You mentioned time and money, and that makes me kind of curious as to the kind of production schedules that these had. Like, obviously, these films all reuse a good chunk of assets, which is to be expected of something like this. But I am curious, like, if
I do know
animation and such was only started on the subsequent film after the previous one had been completed, or if it was sort of a different teams working on these at different times or something. Or
totally. I wish I could be like point you to something. It seems like there's a lot of information that's not out there about this. I can't tell you. I think the series Bible, the movie Bible for the whole thing, was like as early as 2015. So they were at least considering it then. But I don't know. Maybe one of the other guys can fill us in.
I am not sure, but I want to say they were probably all made around the same time. That there was really no opportunity to go back and change anything. These were already what they were going to be, because they were meant for Netflix, and they were released in theaters only because Toho wanted to make some extra cash on them. So,
can I expand on something real fast on that point?
Yeah.
They totally did, because it was all based around Shin's success, man. There was so much stuff everywhere, all sorts of like promotional stuff, in subways, on the street, event. By the time movie 2 and 3 came out, nothing. It was done.
because really there's no incentive to go watch these movies in theater. I think Toho, marketing wise, mishandling these films horrible. Because there was barely any promotion, especially for the second and third one, and everyone already knew that they were going to be on Netflix. So why spend the money and go out and watch it when you can wait like 2 more weeks and see it for the cost you're already paying for Netflix? So, and I think that having so much time between their release hurt them. They should have been dropped all at one time. And
I mean, it was a pretty quick production schedule, man. It was like every 6 months.
I think these films work better together. And
they filled up a time slot. I mean, because of those 3 movies in particular, we've literally gone since 2016 without a Godzilla movie. I don't know. I get what you're saying, but I think they were just. I think it was just they wanted a quick buck, because it seems like all signs kind of point to that. There was that rumor going around that this was like a TV series that was then taken and then molded into 3 movies. I don't know.
Well,
but can we all agree that Galagoo is like the best alien ever?
No, I think Metaphys is the best alien ever.
No, dude, it's all about Galagoo.
Which one's Galagoo?
20,000 years.
Mecha Godzilla City.
Someone's got to do it, man.
20,000 years, Mecha Godzilla. Lord.
I think the anime trilogy has some of the best takes on aliens in the franchise period.
Yeah.
I don't disagree.
Off the top of my head, I would only put Monster Zero above it.
You're right about Mephies, though. Mephies is an interesting cat, for sure, and especially by the 3rd movie.
Especially a lot of the alien films in the 70s got pretty uninspired, and I think that the anime trilogy is head and tails above those movies. Monster, I would put it above, off the top of my head, Destroy All Monsters, Megalon, I'll count that. Gigan, Mechagodzilla, Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Man, how cool would it have been if we got anime cockroaches? Like their take on the cockroaches, like that would have been great.
Yeah, I would have loved that.
I think there's more of a reason for why the aliens are humanoid here than a lot of the older movies. I think it's done more so for thematic purpose. But
totally,
yeah, sure, as anime features, you're expecting more creativity, for them to go wild. But I just don't think that was what they wanted to do. It was supposed to be a slower science fiction, almost hard science fiction take on the franchise to explore a lot of the ideas we've seen before in new ways.
I mean, I think people complain about, like Mechagodzilla City for one. Like, I can understand why people think that that's boring and dumb, but I think it's like the pieces are all there.
Totally.
Really, really interesting takes on classic kaiju and ideas. Ghidorah like coming out of black holes and being able to, change like the
time and space.
Yeah, like literally surrounding it. That's so interesting and has
we're already dead.
Yeah, that's like
that's a really cool scene.
Yeah, I love
but
it.
It's bogged down by the fact that it just
happens.
It just happens, and it feels like it could be explored and exploited a lot more. Like in this medium, which is perfect for stuff.
I will agree that as anime films that they could have gotten more wild with what they're doing. Yeah, I won't disagree there. But I think it was done competently enough that I don't hate these movies. I think there are quite a few more examples of wasted potential in the Godzilla series.
What would you rather watch, Final Wars or the anime trilogy?
I would definitely.
Final Wars. I can have a good fun, laugh at the screen Mystery Science Theater style romp with Final Wars.
I would watch City on the Edge of Battle and The Planet Eater. Final Wars again. I tried to watch Final Wars recently, and I was like, oh, this is not how I remember the film being. Funny story about that movie. The first time I watched it, I was watching it with my mother. I was pretty young, and I told her, this is my favorite Godzilla movie. After my first time, back when it came out on DVD, and she looks at me and says, really? This is your favorite one? And I was so heartbroken.
Well, since we were talking about Mechagodzilla City, should we move on to City on the Edge of Battle?
Yeah. Let's do it.
I didn't watch that movie for the longest time because I heard how it was supposedly worse than Planet of the Monsters, and I didn't like Planet of the Monsters. But then one day, was hanging out with my roommate. We were watching Netflix. I saw Godzilla 2, and I was like, oh, yeah, this does exist, huh? I watched it, and I was like, wow, this is one of my favorite Godzilla movies now. But I'll let you guys take it from here.
Dude, I love you for that opinion.
I love Mechagodzilla City. We've seen Godzilla and Mechagodzilla fight 5 times now. Otherwise, I like what they did with him. I like the ideological and the emotional threads they tied in with the plan they were used from Planet of the Monsters. I think they're different enough to stand on their own. I like the choice that Haruo has to make at the end. And Godzilla destroying. And plus, I really love the music during that scene. As Monstrosities was talking about earlier. Like, I think that's when the music finally hit me with these movies. I was floored. But I love when Godzilla goes scarlet and destroys Mechagodzilla City.
That whole ending sequence is actually, in my opinion, really well done, and is one of the few times I can remember in the franchise where it actually has like intensity going on with the characters. You know, this character that's stuck between making a choice and in characters kind of like against each other, if that makes sense. It's a very well executed finale, in my opinion. Definitely my favorite of the 3 as far as like the endings go.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to give myself some free brownie points. So yes, people in the comment chat section, Toho mismarketed this movie. They should not have pushed Mechagodzilla as hard as they did in the marketing. I was not around for the marketing, so I didn't see that. But
it was ridiculous.
Yeah, that was a mistake, but that was not on the filmmakers. They don't decide those kind of things. So I know it's hard. I know you were expecting to see Mechagodzilla in his traditional fight Godzilla, but looking at the film for what it is and not what the marketing portrayed it as, or not what you might have wanted, I think it's good for what it wants to be, what it does.
I definitely agree. Like, that ending is definitely it's an interesting moral dilemma that's not really seen in Godzilla movies, because Godzilla movies are pretty much always just, we got to kill the monster, if even that. And so that definitely provides for some interesting drama.
It was nice to see some character conflict. Sorry, not to interrupt.
Oh yeah.
It just like, and I'm not talking about just like gray or like, the bad guys with the black hats and the good guys with the white hats, but it's like you have this like alliance with these aliens, and it's like the Bilisaludu are doing like this terrible thing, but we need them to defeat Godzilla, but we don't like what they're doing. I'm not saying it's like the best thing in the world, but it's far more interesting. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. I guess to say something different, like, for some reason, this might sound weird, but one of the issues that just irritates me the most about this movie in particular, and I don't know why, well, I know why it's this one, because there's one shot that exemplifies how stupid this is, but I'm not a fan of Godzilla Earth.
Oh,
solely on the fact that his size adds nothing to the movie.
You said his thighs or his eyes?
His size.
His size.
Oh,
I thought he said his thighs too. I was like, what?
I was like,
Well, I mean, well,
like
like
this.
it's. I like the concept of Godzilla like just basically being a moving mountain, and I think in a different environment that would be really interesting. But the problem that the latter two movies in this trilogy have with Godzilla being 300 meters tall or whatever is that there's
Yeah.
nothing to compare him to. So
Totally.
the fact that he's so big loses any impact that revelation would have on the overall story, because it's still it winds up being somewhat of the same climax as the first movie anyway, where it's like,
Totally.
okay, we have this like little opening to where we could beat Godzilla, and it requires this complex maneuver, complex moral choice in order to do it, and the size doesn't play into that.
The first climax didn't have much of a moral choice.
Yeah. I mean more so in just the fact
The
that
okay.
action. Yeah.
it's
Yeah. It's like the same
you know
kind
what
of
I mean.
action
You know what I mean.
sequence as the
It's
first movie.
yeah.
With the
There's
first
one-
Oh, sorry.
no,
Go ahead.
There's one shot in the whole movie that just exemplifies how kind of stupid I think the size thing is, where it's when the what are they called, the vultures, the little Gundam mechs are flying around. And there's one shot where they kind of fly around like his feet, and they don't put in like a model for the ground at all, so it kind of looks like Godzilla's like floating in the air. And that was like the one shot that I'm like, I guess they're trying to make him look just absolutely massive.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think his foot was off the ground. I think he was walking.
Which looking back, I think that's what it's supposed to be. But the fact that it can come across, at least to me, like my first viewing, I was like, did they just forget the ground? But it again, it just feels like it's meaningless to the overall kind of story that is going on. It's just another, like we were saying earlier, it's a dick measuring contest. How big can we make our Godzilla? Which is a weird criticism to have with this movie, but
it's not actually a weird criticism though, because they were marketing that first movie, especially in the trailer, as like the biggest Godzilla in history, and it's like that didn't have any kind of consequence in the later movies. The only thing that I could think of, which was pointed out to me quite some time ago, was when their colony ship is in orbit in the very beginning, and they say that Godzilla could launch a beam at them and hit them, basically. But that was like the only thing that and because you're entirely right, this is the only time that there was any relevance to his size, because outside of that, it was just like, nothing.
Oh yeah, they could have done more with his size, but that's not a big problem for me. The first climax I noticed in my last rewatch is faster paced than the second movie in its climax, and the strategy is a bit different. I like the ballsy move that Haru takes with sacrificing all the ships, and the time of day makes a difference in the environment. But I do think the second movie does it all better than the first movie does. The trap Godzilla and fire laser at him until his shield drops and we break his dorsal plate.
He's literally the Death Star.
I love the twins, and whenever Toho makes figurines of those characters, I will be first in line to get them.
I do kind of think that the whole Mothra's people, it's this might be one of, if not the most interesting incarnation of the fairies or just general followers. Obviously, it's interesting to have doll-sized girls that represent Mothra in the United States Congress, but like it's
I got that joke, Jake. I like that.
Yeah, I caught it.
That was good.
Like the twins in this movie are definitely, they have, I don't know, I just more of a backstory, not backstory. Well, yeah, they do have a backstory, and it's more, I don't know, even if it's not delved into all that much, it's intriguing. It's another, interesting piece of these movies.
The twins and the Hautua as a whole are the most interesting take on Mothra and her mythology since the Peanuts were playing these roles back in '64 in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. So it's been that long. I hate the Heisei incarnations. They are bland and boring. I feel like
just
I
like
feel
a
like
carbon copy, you know?
yeah, I feel like cheap imitations of the show without any of the charm or character for that matter. The Millennium copies, the ones in Tokyo SOS, they're about the same. I kind of find them less grating than the Heisei ones, but just another cheap imitation of the Showa without really doing much with them. So it's good to get some fresh air.
It would have been improved if they were flying around on a little fairy moth, like the Rebirth of Mothra.
Or in Space Godzilla, I think they were flying around on Mothra. No,
That
the
was
small
Fairy
Mothra,
Oh, Fairy,
transforms
yeah.
into
Good Lord, that movie. Again, just going to what you were saying before about the aliens and stuff. I mean, it presents a lot of interesting ideas, and it's cool little updates. I think that ultimately the final products could obviously have left a lot to be desired, but it's those kinds of things that I think are pretty cool and do distinguish these movies above some of the other ones. They at least were trying to do something different. Doesn't necessarily justify it as being a good movie, but they were
yeah
doing something different.
yeah. Of course, different does not mean good.
Right.
Of course not.
Of
But
course.
but I think these films are good. Sure, they're not perfect. Sure, they don't take advantage of everything they could have done, but they're competent at worst. So I disagree with the people who say that they misunderstood Godzilla or they disrespected Godzilla. I think Gen Urobuchi has demonstrated that he is quite familiar with the Godzilla franchise. There are a lot of nods that I think went over most fans' heads. So he seems to be most familiar with the Showa era, and there are a lot of Showa nods throughout these movies.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Before we go on a Planet Eater, can we just talk about those freaking J-pop songs and how amazing they are?
Oh yes, my favorite is Live and Die, the third movie.
Dude, can I just brag for a second? Okay.
All right.
I freaking went to Japanese karaoke in a Godzilla karaoke room with Kaiju and sang Live and Die with him. That's how much of a true fan I am. No, Live and Die is really good though.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably my favorite out of the three too.
All right, yes. Yeah, Planet Eater. Planet Eater. So the Planet Eater and City on the Edge of Battle are probably in my top 10 best Godzilla movies.
Really?
Really? Wow.
Yes. I love them both.
That's awesome.
Hot takes in this live stream.
Nobody jump on it at once. Come on, guys.
No planets were eaten in the movie.
Well, it's because Godzilla stopped it.
Yeah. King Ghidorah was trying to eat the Earth, but Godzilla was like, "That's not happening on my planet." And he nuked all three heads.
Oh, like we kind of touched on a bit earlier, this movie, kind of like Mechagodzilla, presents a really unique, really potentially really cool take on King Ghidorah.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe even more so than Mechagodzilla, this one felt a little bit underwhelming.
Really? Well, actually, I shouldn't say that like I'm all surprised because there's a lot of that in that I would agree with. I think the build up to him was really cool. But then once it finally came time for him to appear and like the appearance of it and just the visual of those heads wrapped around Godzilla like that. I mean, I love it. But You're right. Once that actually happens, then it's just kind of like, okay, what else? And then it doesn't do anything.
It's that for like 10-15 minutes, it feels like,
Yep.
where it's just
Because
constricting Godzilla, and all this cool buildup happens, and then not much else.
because the fight really does not matter in that movie.
Oh
It's
yeah,
more,
yeah.
it's more about the
I
conflict
agree.
between Haru and Metphys and their whole philosophical
I
discussion.
agree. Yeah.
Like
I think,
I think when the fight matters, it's cool. Like when Ghidorah first comes down and meets Godzilla, and Godzilla fires his beam, and the beam curves. And that's a pretty awesome moment. And then he fires again, and it curves again, and then he wraps around Godzilla the first time. And then after that, you really don't spend much time with that fight. Like you spend most of your time with Haruo and Metaphes, and then like every 5 minutes or so, they cut back for like a minute to Ghidorah wrapped around Godzilla, and then it goes back to Metaphes and Haruo for another 5 or 10 minutes.
Definitely think that if they had upped it a little bit more and cutting between the stuff that was happening with Haruo and Metphys and then Godzilla Ghidorah, I think it could have been on par with how kind of it's been mentioned how we like how City on the Edge of Battle ended. You know what I mean? Just that just conflict between a bunch of different characters at the same time, rather than being like only one seems to matter over another. Because yeah, I mean, Godzilla just kind of gets put into a chokehold, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna Hulk up. Oh, I can't do it. I'm gonna Hulk up." Audience
who was
claps
it
loud
that
enough, and he
mentioned-
eats
was
them.
it you that mentioned, Matt, that the fight between Godzilla and Ghidorah kind of mirrors that of Haru and Metphys in a
No,
way?
I think somebody else probably said
I
that. That sounds
I
way
felt
too
like I've heard that
eloquent for me.
somewhere, and I wish that idea was kind of taken further, because with Metphys being that sort of guiding eye for Ghidorah, I think that would have been
Totally.
something really cool to see, where it's this extremely like seemingly small scale human confrontation, in contrast with this 300-meter tall kaiju quote unquote battle, as they mirror each other. Maybe not 1-to-1, but I think there could have been more to kind of accentuate that parallel.
Absolutely.
That's what happened in Godzilla Final Wars when Ozaki was punching the alien leader, and then
Yep.
in the background you see Godzilla
Yeah,
punching
you're
Monster
right.
X.
There should have been a scene like that. I would have liked that. Sped up footage too, with Godzilla just clobbering them.
Is Up from the Dev still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right, everyone, stop talking. Let's let him take over for the next 10 minutes.
Oh God, I don't want to talk for 10 minutes. Well, I actually think Planet Eater is probably my favorite of the three films. I don't know how you guys think of like.
That's kind of my viewpoint.
Yeah.
It's up there. I have a hard time kind of placing it. I like what it does. It's probably number 2 for me. But I mean, I still like it. I like it a lot.
What's interesting is that the critical reception of the Planet Eater seems pretty positive, actually. That like if you go outside of the Godzilla fans, especially the Western fandom, there's actually quite a few positive opinions about it.
I think
And
it definitely provides some of the more interesting human drama of
Yeah.
the whole trilogy.
I think
The little
Metphys
moral
and
dilemma.
Metphys and Haru are the two best characters, and I think their whole discussion is probably what makes that third film the best one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Hard to argue with that.
Yeah, I love I love Haruo's meditation and his questioning himself in the second movie a lot, and I love the Bill Saludo and their push to turn everyone into transhumans. And then in the third movie, Haruo was pretty much a broken person, while Metaphes is finally bringing his plans to fruition. And I really love the character moments in these movies, like the conversation that Metaphes and Haruo have in the cave, like early in the Planet Eater, when Haruo mentions that the fairy dust is what protected him from Mechagodzilla City, and then Metaphes is like, "Yeah, I know," and then Haruo was like, "Wait, what?" you know, then why are you fooling everybody? And he's like, desperate times call for desperate measures. And then he goes a little bit into his plan, and then Haru admits that he's pretty much given up on trying to fight Godzilla. And then Metaphy says, wait a minute, are you saying that because you no longer have the tools? Are you saying that because you've truly given up? Because if it's the former, you can take those words back and I can hook you up. And then Haru was like, oh, is your god going to come save us? And I loved the moments like that in those movies. I find them a lot more interesting than a lot of the character moments in a lot of other Godzilla films, especially the Heisei and Millennium films.
I would agree with that.
Like, does an interesting conversation even happen outside of the first 30 minutes of Godzilla vs. Destroyer?
No, not that I could think of.
And ultimately, again, I think it all comes down to the fact that these three movies were trying to do something a little bit different. You know, there's that story going around, or went around, I think, around the time of Planet Eater, where the audience was supposed to be completely different than what they were trying to go for with Shin Godzilla. And even though they're not perfect movies, and even though they don't necessarily deliver what I think ultimately could have been something really good in the best manner possible, I think that much like a ton of these other movies that we watch, especially from the goddamn Showa era, you know, there are going to be things that will say, yeah, they're bad, but there's also a lot of these little good things too, which seems to be, you know, in my opinion, the way a lot of people just view Godzilla movies. You know, they're not all perfect movies, but there's a lot of things in them that we love and we like and we can respect. And I think those kind of fit in kind of the same mold.
Yeah, I think what people forget a lot about these movies is that they weren't supposed to be the traditional Godzilla movie. Like, every Godzilla movie between 91 and 2004, excluding 98, which Godzilla fans generally hate anyway, were monster versus monster battles, and Toho was trying to truly try something different. Like, because they knew that Legendary was making King of the Monsters, that Legendary was doing the more traditional stuff with a Hollywood budget. So Toho wanted to do something completely different. They wanted to, hey, everyone thinks that whenever you have a Godzilla movie, you need to have monster battles. So let's get away from that. Let's explore some of the themes that have been in these films since the very beginning in big ways, and let's reinvent a lot of the ideas that have been with this franchise that are in desperate need of updating, since a lot of the Heisei Millennium films are pretty much nostalgia bait. It's those films regurgitated a lot of the same show ideas, and in my opinion, inferior ways. Kind of like what I think of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, like The Force Awakens. But that's just my take.
No, I agree with you. I mean, if they kept on doing the same thing over and over and over, it's just going to run itself into the ground. Especially on the Japanese side of things. I mean, the Americans needed to do a traditional Godzilla movie with the Hollywood money because we had never seen that before. But if we just got more stuff, more of the same, both with Shin and with these movies, I just don't. I mean, the franchise is just going to go stale, and it had been stale for over a decade. You know.
Yeah, the director of Final Wars, Kitamura, mentioned that he was told. I believe he said his friends told him not to accept Final Wars because Godzilla was something only kids and otaku liked, and kids barely like Godzilla anymore. That he had basically become culturally irrelevant by the early 2000s.
And I don't think that's definitely not.
It's not
out
totally
of the question.
inaccurate.
No, not at all.
And I think what proves his statement is that Toho paired the movies up with Hamtaro animations.
Yep.
Because kids weren't watching the movies, kids weren't buying the toys. So Godzilla had become a niche, just repeating the same things again and again and again, and increasingly dull ways. So while the anime films and Shin might not do everything perfectly, I do think they're decent films at worst, and they do a lot of things that were desperately needed by this point.
I know that this statement is probably best served for after we talk about King of the Monsters, but can we just all agree, like, what a great fucking decade to be alive as for a fan? You know,
Oh,
like
absolutely.
we get these
Yeah.
two American movies, despite how you feel about them. You know, you get these two grandiose American movies. You get these freaking four just wild Japanese movies. I mean, I'm not saying it's like the best thing ever, but it's certainly just a really different time than the early 2000s or something of that nature.
Yeah, I think with the anime
Yeah,
trilogy
absolutely.
specifically, I'm just appreciate that they exist, even if I don't necessarily like everything in them, because they're they take risks and they fail sometimes, but that just comes with the territory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So now let's get to everyone's favorite movie.
Oh, it's the best Godzilla movie ever made, and if you say otherwise, you're not a fan
It could be the best movie of all time.
of
All
all
right.
time.
Since Up didn't talk much for the last three, let's let him take over.
Um, I have an interesting relationship with King of the Monsters because I was super excited for it. Um, it's funny, I've gone through this many times in my life where I get super excited for a movie and then I watch it and I kind of am underwhelmed by it because it doesn't match
Mhm.
what I had in my head.
Mhm.
So when I watched King of the Monsters when it first came out, I was actually kind of underwhelmed. If I remember doing a long post on Twitter about kind of how disappointed I was with it, and then people started jumping on my case because I wasn't raving about it.
Jesus.
So I had to
God
defend
bless the
myself with
fucking
that.
Godzilla fandom.
But I did see it a couple more times with some friends and stuff, and I've warmed up to it since. It's not like the greatest Godzilla movie ever, but it's fun. That's it's a fun, simple monster movie, and it's a fun movie to just throw on. It's got some good moments in it. My biggest problem with it is that I just feel like it moves too fast, and you don't really get enough time to relish in the moments where it really works.
I agree.
It's
Well, Monstrosities, you have been notoriously silent about this movie.
Okay, look, I'm gonna be completely honest, and like I'm not gonna hold back or anything. The movie is fine. It's a silly, stupid Hollywood blockbuster that is fun. You shove popcorn in your face. It's just like all the other stuff. It's
Yeah.
fine. It picked up. They listened to what people complained about with G14 and delivered something else. Um, something more along the lines of like Kong Skull Island or something of that nature. Um, but I gotta tell you, man, the thing that turns me off the most, and this is probably not necessarily the form to talk about it, man, it's just the fan reaction, dude. Like just the vitriol and the way, and we can chalk it up to the internet, man, but it's just the way that people treat each other over the whole monsterverse crap, fellow YouTubers, whatever. It's just freaking disgusting. And it makes me on my own channel, we don't talk about monsterverse stuff anymore just because of that fact. You can't say anything without setting somebody off about it. Even saying the movie's okay is a negative connotation to people, or saying it's good but not great. That's a negative connotation.
Or saying it's
And
pro nuclear without saying it's good or bad.
right, it did a lot of good stuff. It's not my favorite. I will say that it's better than G14, but I think a lot like Up from the Depths. It's like over time, it's like you warm up to it a little bit more. And there's some great moments in there. The score's great. The fact that we get to see Ghidorah in full American CGI is amazing. And I will definitely pay it those compliments, but it really, unfortunately, it's kind of marred in my view just from how the fandom has treated other fans just in the whole thing. And with that, I killed the chat.
I think it's my biggest issue with King of the Monsters. So yeah, I think it's just standard Hollywood blockbuster popcorn kind of movie. I kind of think King of the Monsters is the equivalent of like the first Michael Bay Transformers movie in a way, where it's It it's good for the fans, maybe not for general audiences. It can be like good kind of blockbuster fun, but once you like kind of think about it a bit more, the more it crumbles apart. And I think, compared to, all the other movies in this decade that we've talked about, I think this one presents the weakest kind of overall story, even in comparison to 2014, where I think 2014 was kind of had a more charming story in how, simple and up until a certain point family focused it kind of felt. King of the Monsters kind of feels like a really high budget fan film. Not to say that that's inherently a bad thing, but it definitely feels like, okay, we have these sort of human plot devices, these, little comedy relief characters, and all these things that are kind of just meant to bring us to the big monster battle that everyone wants to see. And I think, as I really like this movie, I will just say, like I have a lot of fun with it, but I think it definitely loses some of that, you know, the things that people talk about with this movie are just the kaiju scenes. Nobody talks about.
It's moments. It's individual moments in the movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Much like a lot of other Godzilla movies in the franchise.
Yeah, it's
And
nothing
there's
new.
nothing wrong with that. It's
Yeah,
unfortunately,
completely.
yeah.
I think
Sorry,
it's in I think simply like in that
totally.
compared to everything else we've talked about, it feels like a step back, even though it's pretty much what all the fans want, including myself in a way. But yeah, I think it could have been, you know, a little bit. It should have been held up to a higher standard of quality than I think it wound up receiving.
The fact that it was received the way that it was really baffles me, just because this movie has everything that every other Hollywood blockbuster has, including all the bad dialogue and characters. I'm not trying to throw shade on it, but it's just like I don't get why this movie didn't do better. I'm not talking about in fan context. I'm just talking about
Are
overall.
you talking about critical reception?
Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, it literally is one of those movies where people just want to drink their Coke and eat their popcorn and just turn their brains off, which is fine. But for some reason, all these other movies can do it, but for an American Godzilla movie, it's not allowed to. Does that make any sense, or am I just ranting and rambling?
I
Like
think
get what you're
there's
saying,
definitely a
yeah.
sense of like a kind of a bit of a bias with some of the reviews. I didn't like read a bunch of them, but I think the people see a Godzilla movie, especially Western critics, and I mean the 2014 got fairly decent reviews, but
Yeah, 2014 and Shin got pretty decent reviews from Western critics.
yeah,
It did a lot of really. I mean, it was nice to hear that score. Again, the homage that it paid the original movies and stuff like that. It was nice to have that kind of nostalgia because we have never had it before.
yeah, it
And
was
it's
just
been
cool to see all that in like a big Hollywood movie. Like,
Yeah.
and it's been cool to see how guys like Doherty and the mocap actors who play Ghidorah and Godzilla, how they've really kind of been interacting with the fan base and things like that. Like, this movie was made for the fans, and even though I might not be necessarily like super hot on it, it's cool that something like that exists because, as we've said before, all it does is just further the message of Godzilla along. And I can just imagine some 4-year-old kid saw this with his dad, and is now going to be a lifelong Godzilla fan. Well, who's Ghidorah? Who's Mothra? Rodan?
yeah,
And it's just going to open the doors up for everything else. And again, who cares about what it does weekly and things like that? It's still something that is going to further fuel future fans. And I do think that's important. I really do. And I think that
Yeah.
movie would do it more so than Shin or the anime trilogy, which is, the beauty of the American movies. It just has that much more of a far reaching kind of thing.
For sure. I find the movie really endearing in a way, just knowing how much of a fan Doherty is of the franchise. And he directed it, and I forget if he did screenplay or story, but he played some role in the writing process.
Yeah, he did the
So he
screenplay.
had
Yeah.
so he had a heavy hand in the entire direction of this movie.
Mhm.
And I think it definitely shows because that he cares deeply about this franchise, and that is really that's just nice to see.
Can I interrupt for a second about the being a fan thing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Being a fan or not being a fan usually has little to do with the quality of product these people make.
Oh, for sure.
Because Kaneko was not a Gamera fan at all. He did not want Gamera to breathe fire. He did not want any kids or anything of the like. The fact that he had a child, that Asagi as his maiden, basically, was a compromise between himself and Daie. Because Daie wanted the kids, he did not. And he didn't think Gamera should fly. So
Yeah. I don't
So-
think Doherty being a fan of Godzilla, makes the movie automatically better. I think it just adds a certain sort of
Charm. You
yeah.
can appreciate, as a fan, you can appreciate it, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that the movie is better or worse for it.
Well, both him and Edwards weren't like those Emmerich motherfuckers who thought they had to reinvent the wheel. Like
Yeah,
they knew what
exactly.
worked, and they
Right.
were like, okay, so let's present it as it's been presented instead of changing everything about the character. Which is again something I will say that G14 did well, as did this movie. It respected the franchise rather than thinking, oh, we're Americans, we know how to make movies better than the Japanese.
but Godzilla ¡98 is my favorite Godzilla movie. It respected Godzilla.
I thought it was Godzilla Raids Again.
No. I like Godzilla being a T-Rex ripoff.
Again, in retrospect, I think that, I mean, not to get off topic, but 98 is an interesting era, but it's just nice to be able to have a movie or a pair of movies where you can actually be like, yeah, we had two directors who actually cared about the franchise instead of just being like, oh, Godzilla movies with the cardboard buildings and the rubber suits with the zippers.
Yeah.
That kind of just BS.
Yeah. That attitude gets tiring, and it shows a lack of understanding about the franchise.
It really does.
I'm sure many of the people who dismiss Godzilla have never seen a Japanese Godzilla film in full. They just parrot what they hear, what they think they heard.
Well, hell, dude, most of the people that write articles about Godzilla is like on Screen Rant have never seen a Godzilla movie,
Oh,
but they
God.
it's but yeah, I do agree with that. It's unfortunate, but it's nice to know that at least the problems with these movies aren't what they're doing with the character, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or characters, I should say, because they paid respect to the other
Yeah, what do you guys think of how they treated the Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah? Because they're great. I like the way that they made King Ghidorah like shrouded in a hurricane, as he flied, and how he was shrouded in darkness and rain and lightning. Although it did get a little murky sometimes.
Yeah. At some point, I had to start questioning whether or not they were doing that because it added to the movie, or because they were trying to hide bad special effects.
Probably a little both. Yes.
I was gonna say there's a good couple of shots, especially in the Antarctica scene, where Ghidorah doesn't look that good.
So
yeah.
many particle effects, so many.
Yeah, I mean, like
snow and rain and smoke and ash and
I could
fire and
nerd out
debris.
about how
It
like
gets a little much.
Ghidorah is like way too saturated compared to like the environment, but like
yeah, spare us, please.
Overall, like I enjoy the way that they're treated because it feels very true to their characters. I think Mothra especially got some of the better treatment, and part of that definitely comes from like Doherty answering questions on Twitter and revealing the deleted scene at the end or whatever. But like I they're all treated well. I enjoy that every monster kind of has their own color and aesthetic, but it does kind of lend itself to a really unappealingly varied color palette.
Yeah, the color grading, especially during the Rodan scene, I got quite annoyed with.
It is like the standard Hollywood blue and orange that everyone
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think
talks
of blue.
about.
When I think of this movie, I think of blue. There's so much blue in this movie.
It's literally like blue and orange/yellow, and it certainly makes it aesthetic, interesting to look at for better or worse sometimes. But it's definitely like Hollywood color grading, except like the entire movie is blue and orange.
I didn't like the larva Mothra though. That's might be my least favorite version of that character.
I think the monsters were fine. I think I liked Mothra the most out of the three, but I think they were fine. I nothing particularly like I was just, dude, best this, best that, but I think they were, again, they were comparable and they were good for what they were.
Design wise,
Oh, go ahead.
I think this is the best Rodan since 1956.
100% agree for me.
Yeah,
I
fair
love
enough.
this Rodan.
It should have looked a little bit more like Don Knotts personally. I got that taste. I like the anime movies.
I find it interesting that so many people consider Mothra to be like the scene stealer when she's in the movie for like
5 minutes, if that.
it feels like
maybe
even
not
less,
that.
honestly. Like, I mean, I guess it goes to show how good she looks on screen, and she has some personality.
Yeah, I took
And, oh my god, she sacrifices herself. But
I took a friend to see it with me, and she loved Mothra. She was like, when she started coming through the clouds and the rays started parting through, she was like, "It's Mothra," she liked her. So I
had
think
the same reaction.
Yeah.
But I will say this: it's not the first time Mothra has stole the show. I think she did that in Tokyo SOS as well.
Oh yeah, I think she's become one of the Toho Big Five for a reason. But
I think from the depths, though, as a point, I mean, that character resonates a lot with people,
yeah,
like they like Mothra for whatever reason. It's a giant butterfly, it wouldn't like that.
She is cute in the movie too. Like, even though they make her look more realistic, she still has that kind of innocent, feminine look to her.
And she still looks like her original design too,
Yeah.
which is nice. Again, about all of them,
And
like,
and the fans were shipping Godzilla and Mothra.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
that's truly the movie we need.
Like, minor moment, but when she's like backed up against the building when Rodan's charging her, and she's like crawling up against it, like that adds a lot of humanity to her character that a lot of the other monsters don't get to have, just because of the way that they're built.
And I think that's been true of Mothra since the beginning. Like, you have moments like that in Mothra versus Godzilla, where, especially the scene where Mothra is dying and she lands on her egg and she breathes her final breath before she just passes on. Mothra has always been very easy to root for, and that's probably is a big reason why she's always been a very popular character, even back in the 60s, and why she got her own trilogy in the 90s. I think people forget that Godzilla vs. Mothra was the most successful Heisei film.
Have they bothered to ship Ghidorah's 3 heads with the 3 individual monsters? like, is that a thing yet?
Not that
I know
of.
Sorry, making a really stupid joke, but seriously.
So I'm going to complain a little bit about King of the Monsters.
No, you can't. You mustn't.
You're not a true fan.
Finally, the truth came out. No, I think it's extremely sloppy about its use of nuclear energy.
Fair.
But that's a subject for another time.
You're talking about the scene where Serizawa sacrifices himself with the nuclear bomb.
That's part of it, but then the whole
Nuclear
radiation
energy.
will,
Yeah.
we'll save the Earth, we'll restore the environment. I get where the director was coming from with that. I think he mentions it in the home media commentary. But a big part of he mentions Chernobyl, but a big part of why Chernobyl why the miracle of Chernobyl happened is because humans weren't there anymore. So the wildlife population rebounded because of the absence of humans, not because of radiation. So I think Emma was kind of right that the human population needed to be reduced significantly if nature was going to bounce back. And I think the positive ending we got doesn't really match up with what the film had established beforehand. That and since Godzilla's, is protecting balance, and it was humanity that threw off the balance because she says that Earth was going to die in like 50 years or so if we didn't stop now. That Godzilla realistically should be our enemy, not protecting us from the other monsters. And Gareth Edwards hinted at that in his movie, that Godzilla is the punishment we deserve. Not that it really played out much in that movie, but it would have been nice to see it in King of the Monsters.
Godzilla theme when you look back.
They should have just dropped the whole thematic bullshit. I mean, the thing is, it's a popcorn movie. It's not.
It is. It's a popcorn movie, and
unfortunately, I just don't think that you can really balance them out that well. Again, if we're going to laud criticism against it, I do agree with that.
It's too in your face about nuclear energy. I think it's probably the most vocal film in the franchise outside of maybe the original and maybe Shin about a theme about nuclear energy, but it handles it extremely sloppy. I know people like to point to the Showa films for turning Godzilla into a superhero, but I think Toho did a very wise thing in, they stopped talking about that side of Godzilla when they made those films.
Well, they had to eventually, I feel like I'm going to sound so fucking pretentious saying this, and I'm sorry I'm going to as a kaiju hipster, but I feel like they just inserted that to make people be like, oh, this is a deep movie, when it really, it's shallow at best, and it's not, doesn't have to be deep. You know what I mean? It's a freaking kaiju movie. Not every kaiju movie has to be Godzilla or Shin Godzilla or the anime movies.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I do agree with what you're saying though. It just wasn't.
Especially an American Godzilla movie, it's like American audiences kind of expect they would rather just watch the monsters fight and have big explosive action sequences with a little bit of moral grandizing going on, but that's all they want.
And I also think that Emma could have been cut. Like, it would have been a far more interesting movie, and the film would have had more time to breathe. As Up mentioned, that the pacing was really off, and moments didn't hit as hard as they should have because it just goes right to the next thing. So if you remove Emma's stuff and it just be a movie about Charles Dance, the eco-terrorist, who barely gets anything to do in the movie, versus Ken Watanabe, and maybe Kyle Chandler as his apprentice or something, it would have been a far more focused movie, and the plot could have stayed relatively the same.
The characters were so bad. I mean, I can't say the characters in any of the movies, maybe outside of Shin, were good, but man, that wolf dude being the smartest guy in every room, Godzilla experts, and he's like, no, let me teach you about this. I know wolves.
And whales and stuff.
It's just, again,
drop the helicopter.
Yeah, he kind of undermined it. Monarch, like Monarch is supposed to be the experts, and even he kind of undermined Ken Watanabe as well. Like in 2014, he was the Godzilla expert. He seemed to know the most about Godzilla. But then Kyle Chandler comes in and seems to outdo Ken Watanabe. So I think Ken Watanabe should have been the lead character for the first half of the movie until he dies, and then Kyle Chandler takes over. But
it just it was some shoddy writing, but again, it's like kind of movie that it is, the kind of movie that it was always probably going to be. It's the exact opposite from what G14 was, but it still had those little threads weaved in there. Maybe not so well, but
90% of the people that leave the theater are not going to be thinking about any of that.
no.
Yeah.
Because the general audience wants to see the monster fights.
speaking of monster fights, I think I enjoyed 2014's more than King of the Monsters.
Really?
Yeah, I think.
You mean the one fight you got?
I think Gareth Edwards captured the monsters a lot better.
Fair.
I can actually see
like-
that.
There's weight to them. I think
They feel heavy, like when they
Yeah.
hit each other. You feel it. But whereas this one, I don't know. It felt a little. Something was off about it. It was faster.
Kind of like with Pacific Rim 1 and 2, right? I never saw
Yeah,
Pacific Rim 2,
yeah.
but you could tell just by the cinematography of like the trailer, it was completely different. But I completely know what you're saying.
like I didn't enjoy the last fight in the movie at all.
The which
and
fight?
The last fight in King of the
gotcha.
Monsters,
Yeah.
the third act. I thought that Godzilla breathing fire through Ghidorah's neck and out of his mouth was overdone. I much prefer the kiss of death in 2014. I thought it was pretty simple. Godzilla pops up behind Mother Muto, slowly scratches open her jaws, and blah! And then her neck melts off, and then he roars. Thought that was a very great moment.
I wasn't really too hot on Godzilla eating the head. It was like, okay.
They were trying to one up the kiss of death. That's why they're like, what do we got that
Exactly.
can be bigger
The
and
vor of
better?
death.
and I think it kind of fell on its face. It tried to be cool, and I think it just failed completely.
The fights definitely feel like 2014. Something that it did really well is that everything had so much weight and scale to it, and King of the Monsters is not able to capture that as well as that movie at all.
Not at all.
Especially the Antarctica
begs-
fight in particular.
Yeah.
Like, stop and think about how Godzilla swims underneath this big ice field, comes up crashing through it, and then is able to stand up on top of it.
Yeah. Also, how
But
he
it's a
stands
monster
in, he
movie.
stands
It's
in
not
the water.
supposed to make.
Like, how does he stand in the water when he does his atomic breath after he gets
Oh, yeah.
revived?
I like someone made it like an image edit where he's just doing a little like doggy paddle
Yeah.
underneath the water.
With his
trying to
little-
hold
those
himself
feet.
up.
So I have a question about Maddie. So the scene where she's escaping the stadium, and that giant boulder just like smacks her, and she doesn't react to it and just keeps running. I was like, how? Like the boulder was moving like 90 miles per hour, and it hits her directly, but she just doesn't react to it and keeps running.
Dude, she's the kid from Stranger Things.
I was gonna make the same comment.
Like the first time I watched that movie, I was like, wait, what?
That's just movie
And-
logic for you.
So I
But
found it
again,
weird.
it's all reflective of how they present. There's no weight. The nuclear message seems off. It's because it's not that kind of movie. And I'm not defending it, but like with G14, it's just it approaches the material totally different than King of the Monsters did, which is not bad. It's almost 54 versus all monsters attack or something.
All Monsters Attack, the fandom's favorite Godzilla movie.
The best one there is.
In my top 5.
Oh,
That's a discussion for a different day. That's a different decade.
all right. So, what are your favorite characters? Who were your favorite characters of these new movies, of the 2010 movies?
Ooh, Galagoo.
20,000 years.
Nano metal. Every freaking monologue he had was about that.
Mecha Godzilla.
The characters in Shin were pretty good.
Yeah, Haruo is probably, or not Haru.
Higuchi.
Yeah, he's probably my favorite.
My favorite's Dr. Stanton.
Oh my God, Zilla.
Oh man.
Mine. I love Yaguchi. I love Kayoko Patterson. Are you for real? I loved. I like Haru a lot. I think he doesn't get enough credit. He changes a lot throughout the trilogy, and people don't seem to notice. There's a lot more going on than given credit for. So I will defend this guy. He is the the Shinji Ikari of the Godzilla franchise. and just like I defend Shinji, I will defend Haru.
They are very similar characters in some ways.
Mm-hmm. I love the twins from the anime trilogy. Who else? I love Metaphys, of course. Yes, he might be my favorite villain in the Godzilla series, aside from the controller of Planet X from Monster Zero. I think those two are battling for top spot of my favorite Godzilla villains. Human villains, well, humanoid villains.
What about X?
Oh, from Final Wars.
We love X.
You are a Kaiser. Humans are cattle.
Nothing more than livestock.
I definitely do think that Japanese movies producing characters. I could care less about King of the Monsters and G14's characters.
I like Bryan Cranston's character. What's his face? What's his character's name?
Joe Brody.
Joe Brody. I think he kept the film interesting. I do think Cranston was right that losing him hurt the film significantly.
I actually think that his character dying hurt the box office probably of 2014. Like, I don't think I think a lot of people went to that movie because it was right after Breaking Bad, and so a lot of people went to that movie because they wanted to see Bryan Cranston face off against Godzilla, and then he dies before Godzilla even appears in the movie.
Because the marketing was all Bryan Cranston and Godzilla. People thought they were going to go see Breaking Bad versus Godzilla. Yeah, and people were hyped. Like,
well, people thought they were getting a goddamn solo Godzilla movie with the marketing.
Yeah,
they were having.
Where Godzilla's the villain.
Yeah.
People were hyped for that movie. 2014, I was hyped for that movie. But you got very little Godzilla. You got very little Bryan Cranston, and I think the box office of that movie reflects that. The opening weekend was huge. It made like $93 million.
It dipped pretty big after its second weekend, though. I think.
Yeah, its second weekend dipped hard. I think it has some of the worst legs in recent blockbuster history, if I'm not mistaken. It had bad legs and it dipped hard in the second week, which I think reflects that word of mouth was pretty mixed on that movie. I was expecting more. I would have liked more Bryan Cranston. If not him, more Ken Watanabe or more Elizabeth Olsen. I like all three of them, and they all got the short end of the stick.
And with that, we killed the chat.
I have nothing to add.
Nothing to add.
There's not really much more you can say about G14. Well, let's. How about this? We are at the end of a decade. At, the start of the Leiwa era. I get in trouble if I say Reiwa.
That's not how you say it.
Well, I don't know how it's. Somebody said it was supposed to be with an L. How are you supposed to say it?
I have no idea. I just say Reiwa.
Can we get
a true fan?
Can we get an expert?
A true fan.
Why don't you speak Japanese?
On chat.
But with the advent of another decade in front of us, what are your hopes? Do you want this kind of thing to continue with, you have Japanese movies and American movies, like what is it that you guys hope for on an individual basis?
I hope that they continue to experiment.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, amen.
Yeah, I agree.
I kind of like the dichotomy between the kind of safer, more crowd pleasing stuff that we get with the MonsterVerse films and the more experimental stuff from Japan. think it's a nice balance, and I would like to see that continue.
There's like, I mean, out of every movie that came out this decade, at least one of them is like, up there as someone's, top 10 or top 5
It's a
Godzilla
good
films
point.
now.
It's actually a really good point.
There's, I keep looking in chat, people are, keep saying like, oh, I didn't like Shin as much as I loved King of the Monsters, or I liked 2014 more than the anime trilogy. Like, there's, as much as, people will have flame wars online about, the merits of each of these movies, I think it's certainly impressive that there's such a wide variety of stuff that's been released
Mhm.
that at least one of them is bound to please a Godzilla fan.
Totally.
I'm disappointed I didn't get Godzilla 3D to the max. That's what was supposed to happen before 2014 became a thing. Before the director of Hedorah, Yoshimitsu Banno, was trying to get that movie made, and then Legendary approached him and took it off his hands.
We owe a lot to him.
Hey
Yeah.
guys, a wild D-Man 1954 just
I
appeared
just
in the chat.
saw.
Oh shucks.
Freaking Derek, dude. Freaking Derek. Who
King
likes
Kong.
Derek? Raise your hand. I'm raising my hand.
King Kong's gonna beat Godzilla in 2020.
Boo! God, that was so silly. It was funny when he did it, but then like just the reaction he got online was just like, oh Lord. Okay.
Start the new decade off strong.
Yeah.
The biggest fucking divide in the entire fandom. If it even causes one, it could not somehow.
I honestly hope that we have another something similar to Shin not in terms of tone and stuff, but in terms of having a financial and cultural impact in Japan specifically.
Mhm.
Because I don't really know if, I know it's heresy to say, but even with the American movie, I don't necessarily know if like these performances are really warranting of an American, section of the franchise on a long-term basis. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's gonna need something else to kind of kickstart it. You can only, go off a Shin for so long. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
King of the Monsters box office performance was not good. Not so hot in Japan either. It sold 1.2 million tickets, which is pretty bad. That's down there with most of the Millennium films, and that's below 2014 as well. And the Millennium films did not sell well, so that was a pretty bad time for Godzilla in terms of popularity and box office revenue. So, and the anime films were a niche in a niche franchise. So,
Obviously Toho has a long-term plan. I mean, they've been with their stuff, and they probably have like a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, or whatever it is. But at the same time, I just don't want another Heisei Millennium thing where you're just like, you're pumping out these movies and just squeezing every penny you can. And then it's like, okay, well, you know what? Put it on the shelf for another decade. And then we're done. It's, I don't know. It'll happen one way or the other. But it would just be nice to continually try to push that envelope and see if we can get better films, in terms of like the Japanese side is mostly what I'm talking.
That's the worry for me with like this couldn't even not be what they're doing in Toho cinematic universe that they want to do.
Yeah.
Like that could very easily devolve to the next Godzilla versus blank series.
Yeah.
well, to be fair, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I don't expect them, go making, a new solo Rodan or Mothra movie. I think the days of those happening are long gone, especially considering what I recall to be, not really incredible box office performance of Mothra's. So, like, I hope that, I don't want like a Shin Mothra movie or something, but I just hope that they keep toying around with the conventions of Godzilla and, making more new stuff out of it, even if it's not, not something that everyone enjoys. I enjoy the variety and new ideas.
Arnaverse in the chat mentioned that let's get more auteurs like Anno to handle Godzilla. And yeah, I think so. The Millennium films were supposed to be what we saw this decade. They were supposed to be alternative takes on Godzilla to shake things up. But they hired the main director of the Heisei films to direct 2000, and then Tezuka directed 3 of the movies. And then, so really the only 2 that stood out were the GMK by Kaneko and Final Wars by Kitamura. So I think it's important for Toho to keep putting new people in charge.
Yeah, and give them fucking time, man.
Yeah,
give them time.
Please, no more movie a year. Please don't do that. Yeah.
That isn't, time is important, because just Kaneko, just look at Gamera 3 versus GMK. I like GMK, but there is a huge drop in quality between those 2 movies. And that's because Kaneko didn't have time and freedom.
Yeah. And I mean, he definitely revealed a lot of that at his panel at G-Fest this year. Like,
yeah.
It's definitely a loss of authorship. I mean, like minor offset, but Gamera 3 is like a masterclass of kaiju cinema.
Yeah.
And as much as I love GMK, there's definitely a noticeable dip in overall quality, and I would even argue creativity.
I don't mean to take too many shout outs, but I got to give a shout out to my Space Tree Studios, and also straight from Japan, guys, Kaiju Noir has appeared in the chat.
Oh,
fellow YouTuber Kaiju Noir, Andres.
I will mention that Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, and Shin Godzilla are the only 2 films to be recognized by Cinema Junpon, which is a prestigious Japanese film magazine organization type deal. That's a pretty big deal in Japan. So Guardian, Shin Godzilla, and I think 54 are the only 3 to be critically acclaimed.
Huh.
So I think that's a pretty big deal. We got another critically acclaimed movie this decade.
It's official. It's the best movie ever made.
Sorry, I'm writing a message to T-Man. We need those other guys. Sorry. Jake knows who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Everybody get in the chat. Just evolve into
Flame War.
A flame war.
And D-Man said, no, we don't. Not all of them. Gamera Guardian of the Universe is like my favorite kaiju film of all time, in my opinion. And
Heck,
it's sorry, go ahead.
No, you can finish. My bad.
No. I'm just ranting about, it's a good movie, and I think it still holds up even, what is it, 25
years, almost 25.
Yeah.
Man, really? Wow.
I think the last 4 Gamera movies have been among the best Giant Monster movies ever made. Gamera Guardian of the Universe, Gamera Advent of Legion, Gamera The Revenge of Iris, Gamera the Brave. Gamera has had a very solid last 25 years. His movies haven't done the best at box office, but quality-wise?
Yeah, which unfortunately never seems to be talking much these days, just in terms of, everything has to be done on the almighty dollar, which I get, but...
Mm-hmm. So hopefully we get some Gamera in 2020.
Fingers crossed.
A remake of Super Monster. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yes. Except this time we would just take the footage from the Heisei films.
Yes. You know what? That's not a bad idea. That's actually really good. That's freaking brilliant. Or do the same thing with the Godzilla films. Like, that's actually pretty freaking cool now that I think about it. Like, that could be a fun fan project for somebody.
So speaking of Gamera, how would you feel about Kaneko coming back and doing another Godzilla film?
Didn't he say he would be interested?
I think he did.
Like I thought there was some like panel recently with a lot of
He was actually on stage with a bunch of people at the 65th. Like he was up there with, with
that's what I was thinking
Suzuka.
of.
And so I mean he obviously still has some contacts in there, but you know how the Japanese are. The studios ask the director. It's, you know what I mean? It's like they place them in charge. It'd be cool. He hasn't really, I don't think his career has exactly been like, you know, rocketing like it did in the, you know, the 90s and the 2000s. You know what I mean? His last movie was a J-pop Back to the Future 2 comedy romance movie, which is entertaining but weird as fuck.
You have me sold already. I better go check this movie out.
Yeah, it's, well, see, the thing is, like, derivative, and like there's some cool ideas in there, but it's just like he self-references himself in the movie, and it's just weird. Apparently, he's also like a J-pop historian, which I was like, what? That's okay.
Oh, speaking of kaiju, and since we're still in this decade, check out Love and Peace.
Love and Peace?
Yes, has anyone seen that movie?
No. What is it?
It has a kaiju in it for a few minutes, but it's a Christmas movie as well, so it's a lot of different genres. It's directed by, I can't think of his name right now. Hang on. Love and Peace. I think it came out 2016. No, 2015.
I heard of it.
Here we go. I'll put it in the chat. And it's by, I don't want to butcher his name, so I'm just going to put it in the chat as well. There you are.
Cien Sono. Or is it Sono? I'm a weeb. I don't know these things.
But it's a pretty wholesome movie that you can watch with the family. So have everyone gather around the TV during Christmas dinner and enjoy some Love and Peace.
With giant monsters. Shin Godzilla has become a family tradition. You know, it's such a Christmas kind of movie. You think I'm joking? No, I'm kidding.
It's right there with Die Hard.
So, as what Matt was saying earlier, yeah, Toho is going to have to find something to, I guess, not replace Shin Godzilla, but a new hot point, because they can't coast on Shin Godzilla's success forever. The anime trilogy weren't big hits. 2014 and King of the Monsters weren't big hits. So, and Skull Island and the Pacific Rim's movies and the Attack on Titan movies did worse than all of those. So, I think whether or not kaiju being back is a question still. Shin has been the only big hit in Japan.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how that's going to play out in the 2020s once Toho starts making their own live action films again.
Assuming that they do start making the live action films again. You know, I mean, there's still a big freaking question mark around a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's going to be interesting regardless to see what happens. Like I said, you know, I'm about 99.9% sure that they already have plans for something, or something's already in the works. Like, I think that we're literally not going to go a year without Godzilla. Like, there will be something in 2021. Don't know what it's going to be, but I don't think that Kong's going to be it, you know?
Of course not.
Who knows how long it goes after that?
Toho has been quite open about them wanting to expand the franchise, and I'm sure that includes plenty of movies and plenty of anime. So if you were disappointed by the take on the Genera Butcher treatment on Godzilla for the anime trilogy, I'm sure that there'll be plenty more anime. So,
well, you know, D-Man made an interesting point, because, you know, D-Man, unlike some of us, knows some stuff because he talked to some Toho. No, he really did. But he said, I never know how much I'm allowed to talk about, but after speaking with Toho reps, they seem pretty into the MonsterVerse. So it's going to be interesting.
I wouldn't be surprised, since, you know, Toho gets to pocket a lot of money without doing anything.
Don't quote me on this, okay? But I'm telling you, just watch. Just watch. Not part of the same series, I'm telling you. It's further along than any of us think.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it is. Like I'm sure Toho had already decided long before they talked to Anno in January 2013 they were going to do a movie. I'm sure they're probably talking about that back in 2011, 2012. They were getting wound up and prepared. So, the Planet Eater came out in late 2018, and I'm sure those were all done by 2016, 2017. So yeah, Toho has had plenty of time to prep for whatever comes next. But they probably just can't say, I don't want to say until
Godzilla
versus
go
Kong.
ask. I'm going to start bad mouthing here. We should go ask Mr. He has all the theories.
Ask who?
Mr. H. What's the theory about the MonsterVerse? Sorry, it's devolving to that kind of chat.
People in the chat are pitching for Jordan Peele to direct the
Yeah.
Tango remake.
Matango remake. Huh. You know what? A monster that really needs to come back is a very famous creature that didn't give it his time in the light.
Skeleturtle.
Boom, there we go. Just one. What's his face? I can't even remember his name. Yeah, ouch, that's bad.
What about the lizard that guy swings around on King Kong?
I'm thinking about the walrus from.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, what the hell was that thing called? The thing that got completely shredded up in. God, hold on. I got the movie right here. It's in No, not Latitude Zero.
The movie was
Gorath.
Yes, yeah, there we go. Couldn't think of it.
And I forget what that walrus thing is called, which apparently is not a.
You said it's not a walrus?
Yeah, it's a lizard, I guess, because yes, it looks so much like a lizard. Maguma, there you go. Maguma, whatever it is.
You know what?
Dude, he got his ass handed to him in that movie. That was beautiful.
Yeah, he got blown up.
Slice and dice.
Also, a creature that needs to come back is Varan.
We haven't seen that really bad 2D image of him flying in the sky from the original movie.
He was supposed to be in GMK, but Toho was like, yeah, no.
Not popular enough.
Yep. Him and Anguirus.
Ron kills the stream.
Ron did kill it.
It's his revenge for being neglected all these years.
Well, I mean, is there anything else that we want to talk about? What do you think?
I mean, we're coming close to 3 hours now, so.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So.
All right, quick question.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy this decade of Godzilla? Everyone give their answer.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll go with you. I think we've had more good movies, more entertaining movies than bad.
More than anything, there's just been a lot to talk about. There's just been a lot of interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. 3 of my favorite Godzilla movies came out this decade, so I'm pretty satisfied.
Yeah, we got things that we've never had in the 65-year franchise, of the franchise, just within the past 4 years. Or, 6 years, I guess.
That's pretty.
Yeah, most of the content's been in the last half of the decade. It wasn't even like a full decade.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's because Godzilla was dead for 10 years.
12 years. Even longer. It's the longest break, right?
Oh, no, Final Wars 2004 and 2014.
Yeah, that was 2004 to 2014 was the longest break.
Was the Americans, and then Shin. But if you're going from Shin, that's 12 years. But I think we all can agree that 98 is still the best American Godzilla film.
I mean, of course.
Because
Baby Godzilla.
because Matthew Broderick is the best character we can ever hope for.
I don't know, man. There wasn't enough nano metal in it.
Nano metal. Mecha Godzilla.
20,000 fish.
20,000 phantoms.
20,000 fish. Oh man. Well, wow, it's been a solid 3 hours.
Yeah, that went a lot longer than I expected.
Yeah, we were talking like
Can I-
maybe
can I
like
just-
90 minutes.
Just want to take the opportunity to thank you for being invited here. It's been a real pleasure, like meeting up from the desk for the first time, and hanging out with Blunova again, and I guess Jake. But I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
I want to say that I've been watching Monstrosities. I've been watching your channel for a long time, so it's been an honor to finally talk to you.
Thanks, man. I really,
Yeah, I
it's-
really
it's been
enjoyed
really cool.
your Godzilla reviews that you were doing. I think the last one you did was Godzilla versus
King Ghidorah?
Mothra.
Oh,
From
Mothra.
the
Yeah,
Aces
that's
series,
true. And we're
yeah.
actually going to be restarting those again.
Yay, that's what I
Either
have to
late-
hear because
like
it's been so
next
long.
month or January. No, it
Yeah.
has. We didn't even release one this year. We definitely have a plan though. This whole YouTube nonsense has kind of jump started a bunch of us, but I really appreciate that, man. Thank you so much.
Well, it's about time you got back to it, you hack. I've been
Yeah.
patient. I've been patiently waiting, and you've been. It's been 20 years, 20,000 years for that matter, since you've released a review, and I'm like, these hacks.
Yeah, well, I yes, pretty much yes. We'll get back to it though, for sure.
It's good to hear.
It's a lot of fun. In fact, Brian was actually just calling me as we were on the stream. He's going to spoil me in about Rise of Skywalker stuff. So, we should. I mean, we don't have to do it again immediately anytime soon, but we should try to do something like this again. Maybe
2029.
conversation. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There we go. Yeah, 2029.
Mark your calendars.
The decade tradition.
But I think I don't typically go like I talk to people, like on the YouTube in a setting like this. It's really nice to just chillax and just kind of talk shop with people, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And everyone's been super fucking cool, and we can all just kind of like chill and talk about something that we really love, and how it affected us. Like it's I don't know, just interesting perspectives, and I appreciate you guys giving different perspectives and also not just conforming to what the masses might want.
The persecution of the masses, if you will.
Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah, I agree though. I'd be down to do this again relatively soon.
Just maybe not with Jake next time. Just kick him out.
He's such a jerk. Oh my gosh.
Listen, I'm sorry that I enjoy the villain theme from Batman.
No, it'd be cool to do that. But yeah, I'm actually gonna have to probably shove off here in just a minute.
All right, yeah, me too. It's getting pretty late where I'm at.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
been
I've been
fun.
up for like 24 hours. It's time for
Oh
me to head out.
Jesus, dude! I hope you can sleep in tomorrow or something. God,
Sleep? Me sleep? Never.
sleep is for the weak.
Exactly.
All right, gents. Again, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been a
I hope
pleasure.
everybody in the chat had a good time too. And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Ups. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been fun for me too. Thanks for coming in.
And Daikaiju,
Chatting.
nice meeting you.
It's nice meeting you both. My first time talking to either of you. I know Matt already. I don't care about
He regrets that.
Guys, get a room. Jeez. 4 kids. 4 kids.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend, okay? And we'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Talk to
Take
you
care.
later.
Bye.
Bye.
you too.